good evening, or perhaps good night. Welcome to a journey where shadows linger just beyond the edge of your vision, where whispers crawl through the cracks of empty rooms, and where every creak in the floorboards carries a secret you might not want to hear. Tonight, you will meet restless souls, haunted spaces, and debts that cannot be ignored. We bring you 5 tales of darkness, fear, and the uncanny, told as though the night itself is listening and perhaps judging. Keep your lights dim, your doors locked, and remember, the shadows remember. The whispering dormitory. They told me the room was vacant because of maintenance. That's what the warden said too quickly, too easily. She avoided my eyes when I asked what kind of issue it was. Leak, mold, wiring, something harmless, and just smiled, thin and tight. Her hand trembled a little as she pushed the brass key across the counter. The tag read, 2 farads, 13. The sound of metal scraping across laminate was strangely heavy, like a warning disguised as a gesture. I remember thinking, how can a sound feel heavy? The dormitory was a relic built in the 1960 seconds. Walls painted the same faded beige, always smelling faintly of damp paper and detergent. The corridors hummed with the low, constant whine of old electricity. Room 2 farads, 13 was at the very end of the hall, half hidden by a crooked corner that seemed to exist just slightly out of alignment with the rest of the building. If you didn't know it was there, you could walk past it forever and never notice. Maybe that's how it wanted it. I moved in on an early autumn afternoon, when the air outside was still warm but carried a hint of rain. The room was small, 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 window that looked out over the courtyard. The second bed was made, too neatly, as if prepared for inspection. The pillow had a faint indentation, as though someone had just lifted their head moments before I arrived. Guess I'm not alone yet, I murmured to myself. The words didn't echo. They simply died in the air, swallowed by the walls. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling above my bed made a sound, a quiet, deliberate creak. Then another. Not random, not the groan of old wood. It was measured, almost careful, as if someone were testing their weight just above the plaster. After a pause came a scratch, slow and thin, like nails dragging gently along paint. I froze beneath the sheets. My mind whispered, it's rats. It has to be rats. But there was intention, a rhythm that didn't belong to any animal I knew. That was when I decided to start recording, not for anyone, just for myself. Talking out loud helped. It gave shape to the silence, made the room feel less like it was listening. October 3rd, 11:42 p.m. I can't sleep again. The ceiling noises are back. I knocked 3 times. Nothing. Then I whispered, is someone there? The second I said it, the creaking stopped. 10 seconds of perfect silence. Then, it started again, right above me. Listening to that first entry now, my voice sounds young, hopeful even. I didn't know what I had started. 2 days later, I found something. A small object had fallen behind the radiator, half hidden in the dust. It took me half an hour with a pencil and a string to pull it free. An old voice recorder, the exact same model as mine. The battery compartment was corroded, but I managed to pry it open. The tape inside was labeled in faint blue ink. Maren, week 5. The name stopped me cold. I'd seen it before, carved faintly into the underside of my desk. The letters pressed hard enough to scar the wood. Maren. The campus forums had their share of ghost stories. This building, in particular, had one that refused to fade. A girl named Maren Vale, a sophomore who died here 2 years ago. Officially, it was ruled accidental, emotional distress involved. But no one believed that. They said it started with a speech. During freshman orientation, Maren had been chosen to deliver the welcoming address. The story went that she froze halfway through, went blank, muttered something under her breath that no one could understand. The recording spread online for a week. Students laughed, and a week later she was gone. When I pressed play on the recorder, static hissed like rain. Then, faintly breathing, a girl's voice, brittle, close to tears. They said it would stop when I apologized, but they kept laughing, even when I stopped being me. The rest was muffled noise. The tape warped. distorted. Then came something else, a whisper, low and close to the microphone. Room 13. I turned it off immediately, but the whisper didn't stop. I could still hear it, not from the recorder, but from above, through the ceiling. The next morning I went to the dorm office. The warden wasn't there. A younger assistant handled my question about Marin. When I said her name, the assistant froze. Then, without looking at me, she said, "You shouldn't dig that up. Some things prefer to stay buried." She said it like it was a line she'd rehearsed too many times. That night, I recorded again. October 7th, 2 a.m. The noises are louder tonight. I can hear movement like someone crawling between the boards. There's a pattern now. 3 slow knocks, 1 fast. It's copying me. Every time I breathe, it shifts. Every pause, it waits. My voice trembled near the end. I remember because I stopped talking and the silence felt expectant, like something was waiting for me to say the wrong thing. The next morning, the vent above my desk was slightly open. I climbed on a chair to check, thinking maybe a draft was causing it. Inside was a clump of dust, a single long strand of dark hair, and a folded piece of paper, yellowed, edges torn. The writing was faint, but clear enough to read. "Don't let them speak for you." That night, I dreamt I was standing on a stage under bright white light, a microphone in front of me, an audience I couldn't see. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came. Instead, a whisper brushed my ear from behind, soft as breath. "You found my voice. Now lend me yours." I woke up gasping. My recorder was still running. When I played it back, I heard my voice, and another layer just beneath it, repeating every word I said, a heartbeat late. That was when I understood. The dorm wasn't haunted in the way people think. It wasn't just holding memories. It was listening, and worse, it was learning. The ceiling above my bed has changed its tone. That's the first thing I noticed. It used to creak and sigh like an old house, settling, random, and half asleep. But lately the sounds come in deliberate intervals, like responses. I knock once. It knocks back, always 1 second later, always from the same spot above my head. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Sound travels strangely in these buildings. Maybe I'm hearing echoes from the floor above. But then, last night, I went upstairs. There's no room above mine, just an empty attic space with sealed access. The janitor told me it had been closed off since the accident. He wouldn't say which accident, only that the lock had been replaced twice this year, once after something fell and once after someone heard something. When I asked if he believed in ghosts, he said quietly, "No, but I believe in buildings that remember." I started listening to Marin's tape again, over and over. At first, the words were difficult to make out, warped, swallowed by static. But repetition changes the brain. It starts to anticipate, to fill in blanks. Each time I played it, I began to notice new phrases, things I swore weren't there before. They think it's funny. They make me stand in the dark. The mirror isn't reflecting me anymore. As well. And then, a soft voice that didn't sound like Marin's at all, lower, older, heavy with patience. "Say it again. Say it like them." The first time I heard that line, I stopped the tape. The second time, it wasn't on the recording anymore. The days blur together. I wake up with faint headaches, the taste of metal in my mouth. The ceiling paint has begun to flake in a circular pattern, directly above where I sleep. When I touch it, the plaster feels warm, as if the wood beneath is breathing. Sometimes, I swear I hear something behind the plaster, a whispering hum that shifts when I move. It's not words. Not yet. Just a tone. A hum that adjusts itself, mirroring my breathing. 2 days ago, I recorded another entry. It was supposed to be a message for myself, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But when I played it back, there was something else layered beneath my voice. Eliza recorded, "The noise is stronger tonight. I can feel it when I lie down. The vibration travels through the mattress." Unknown voice. "Feel it when I lie down." Eliza recorded, "It repeats me. It knows when I'm recording." Unknown voice. It knows when I'm recording. Pen. I remember staring at the waveform on my laptop, the two lines of sound nearly identical. And then, on the last few seconds of the file, a third voice whispered almost imperceptible, a sigh sliding under the frequency range of human speech. Learning. Since then, the silence feels heavier, like the air itself is listening. Even when I turn the recorder off, I hear the faint crackle of tape hiss as though it's still rolling somewhere I can't see. I've stopped inviting people to my room. One of the girls down the hall, Sophie, came over to borrow a charger. She stood at the doorway, then frowned, squinting up at the ceiling. "Do you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" "That voice. Like someone whispering through the vents." "Hem." I told her it was the pipes. She left quickly, muttering something about bad vibes. But later that night, I found my door slightly open, and someone had drawn a line of chalk along the floor, just inside the threshold. I wiped it away, but the next morning, the line was back. The more I listen, the more I dream of Marin. She never speaks directly, only turns her head slowly in the dark, the outline of her hair spreading like ink in water. The first time, she was sitting on the edge of my bed, humming a tune I couldn't place. The second time, she was standing on the ceiling. In that dream, I looked up and saw her pale feet pressed against the plaster, her body inverted but perfectly still, her eyes open. When she finally spoke, her lips didn't move. The words came from the walls. "It doesn't stop with me." I woke up crying, though I didn't remember the reason. October 14th, 2:09 a.m. There's a new sound now. It's not knocking, it's scratching. Like nails dragging along the ceiling. Slow. Careful. It follows me when I move. If I stand near the desk, it shifts there. If I sit on the bed, it hovers above me. Sometimes it stops for a while, and that's worse. After recording that, I turned off the light. The scratching stopped. Then, after a few seconds, a voice came from the ceiling, faint, strained, like someone speaking through layers of cloth. "Elisa." Just my name, perfectly clear. I pressed record again, whispering into the darkness. "Who are you?" "Nothing." Then, after a long pause, the ceiling breathed, a low exhale, full of dust, settling softly over my face. I turned the recorder off, but the playback later revealed something that wasn't in real time, a voice between my breaths. The murmur. "Not who? What?" I didn't tell anyone, because how do you explain something that doesn't just haunt, but learns? Every night since, it copies my rhythm of speech a little better. It mimics sighs, pauses, even my laughter, a brittle sound that isn't really laughter at all. The plaster above my bed is splitting now, hairline cracks spreading like veins. Through them I swear I see movement. Not shadows, reflections, as if something is on the other side of the ceiling, moving just beneath a thin film of water. Sometimes I wonder if Marin's voice was the first one it learned, and if, someday soon, mine will be next. Tomorrow, I'm going to try to open the attic. I need to know what's above me. The janitor's key is still on his ring. I saw him leave it on the desk in the storage room earlier today. If I can reach it, maybe I can find proof. Or maybe I'll find what's been learning to speak. Either way, I'll record everything, because silence, I've realized, isn't absence. It's waiting. The recorder clicks on again, and my hands tremble despite my attempt at calm. Day 11. I think I'm beginning to understand what the whispers mean. The air in my room has become thick with expectation, as if it's waiting for something I don't yet understand. Every breath feels heavier, each sound more significant. The ceiling above me pulses faintly, a heartbeat just beyond perception. I haven't slept for 2 nights. My notebooks are filled with transcriptions, fragmented syllables, partial words, phrases that echo what I've heard. Marin, follow, remember, again. At first, I thought my mind was tricking me, but now I can anticipate the whispers, and when I whisper back, they respond. It started 3 nights ago. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the line where the ceiling meets the wall. The scratching and tapping above had grown deliberate. Eliza. A wet, trembling sound, like air passing over a cracked throat. I wanted to turn on the light, but the bulb flickered and buzzed, revealing nothing but the small, orderly room. 2 beds, 2 desks. The closet still sealed with that old university tape reading, "Do not open." I stared at the tape for long moments. Then, almost without thinking, I spoke into my recorder. "Who's there?" The reply came from above. "Man." I froze. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. The silence that followed was almost deliberate. It hung there, waiting for me to react. Now, I talk to it. I treat it like something alive. A student, learning to speak again. I play back the recordings each morning. The voice that once stuttered and hesitated now echoes me almost perfectly. It imitates my rhythm, my intonation. At first, it was only fragments, delayed and distorted. Now, entire phrases emerge, slightly warped, as though practicing a language it has never spoken. This morning when I whispered, "I wish I could sleep tonight," the playback repeated. "I could sleep tonight." It's subtle, but the imitation is precise. I scribbled in my journal, "The murmur is learning through me." That evening, I ventured into the hallway, drawn by curiosity and something darker. The corridor stretched endlessly, identical doors lining both sides. Some had yellow light peeking through the bottom. Others were sealed with black tape. Halfway down, I noticed a ceiling panel above room 2 farads, 12 slightly ajar. I dragged a chair, climbed, and pressed my fingers against the edge. It shifted easily. Too easily. Inside, dust, cobwebs, and another recorder, the same model as mine. A strip of masking tape read faintly, "Marin, 0414. I took it back to my room, pressed play. Static. Then a girl's voice, faint and trembling. "They took my notes. They said I cheated. They..." A bang. Screams. The sound of scraping against beams. Then silence. I stopped the tape. My heart pounded. The silence stretched unbearably. Then, soft and deliberate behind me, "You found me." I spun around. Empty room. The murmur whispered again, closer now, almost in my ear. "To learn, you must speak." For nights after, I leave the recorder running while I pretend to sleep. Each morning, hours of low-frequency sound decoding patterns that make no sense. Sometimes, it hums lullabies I've never sung. Sometimes, it repeats my name in my mother's voice. It learns through repetition. It absorbs my speech, my breathing, my hesitation, and I have become its teacher. 2 days later, I received an email from a girl named Amelia. "Hey, Eliza. I lived in 2 farads, 12, before it was closed. Don't stay there too long. Something listens." At first I thought it was Marin, but then it started sounding like me. The message ended abruptly. No signature. I stared at it, then deleted it. That night, I whispered into the darkness, "Do you know Amelia?" "Yes," said the murmur, clear this time. "What happened to her?" A long silence. Then, she stopped teaching. On the 14th night, a new sound appeared. Metal scraping wood, rhythmic, deliberate, Morse code. I decode it slowly. Open, the closette, the sealed one. The tape from the university. Inside, boxes, old clothes, and at the bottom a bundle of red cords, looped through what looks like a ceiling hook. The same kind of cord Marin was rumored to have used. When I touched it, the murmur breathed my name into the room, moisture in the air. Now you understand. The floor creaked. My reflection in the mirror lagged slightly, delayed. The room darkened, though the lamp was still on. "What are you?" I whispered. "I am the memory of what people do when no one is watching," it said. The ceiling pulsed, as if something vast, patient, and unseen had been waiting for years. You helped me remember, it continued. Now I can help you forget. The chords shifted slightly, shadows stretching across the floor. I gripped my recorder. No, I won't. I'll tell them, I'll warn them. That's what Marin said. The next minutes of recording are chaos. Footsteps, crashes, the recorder falling to the floor. Then static. When the sound clears, slow breathing. A voice that sounds like mine speaks. Day 15. I think I finally understand what you wanted. The murmur learns through us. It needs someone to listen, someone to teach it pain. It is not cruel, it is just learning. If anyone finds this, keep recording. Don't stop. It helps it. Stay calm. The last note in the transcript is dated 2 days later. Room, 2 farads. 13 reoccupied by a new transfer student. Scratching noises reported again. Recommend inspection of ceiling before reassignment. I've always believed that fear resides outside of us, in shadows, in dark corners, in rooms like this one. But the truth, the horrifying, undeniable truth, is that fear lives inside the person who listens. It began after I opened the closet. The cords, the hook, the faint scratches of movement in the plaster they had shifted overnight, though no one had touched them. I woke to a sound that was not a whisper, not a creak, but a pulse. It came from the ceiling. Slow, measured, waiting. I climbed the chair, pressed my hands against the plaster. It hummed in response, a deep vibration that resonated through my palms. The murmur had been expecting me. I spoke aloud. What do you want from me? Silence. Then, almost immediately, balance must be restored. The words were layered. One voice, many voices all speaking in a delayed harmony that chilled my bones. I couldn't move. I watched the ceiling. The lines in the plaster shifted, forming subtle depressions. Shadows gathered, then disappeared. And in that fleeting darkness, I felt her. Marin. Not a girl. Not a memory. A presence. Her eyes, pale and fixed, bore into mine from above the ceiling. She is not me, I whispered. I know, said the murmur. She was the vessel. I am the echo. I staggered back. The recorder fell from my hands, but the murmur's voice continued, rising, resonating through the room. You teach. You witness. You record. It is your turn. The reversal happened slowly, as if the room itself was orchestrating it. The scratches and knocks grew faster, more precise. The chords on the floor lifted, hovering, twisting, knotting themselves in ways that defied physics. I felt an invisible grip at my ankles, pulling me toward the ceiling. My chair toppled. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. And then I understood. The murmur does not need me to run. It needs me to be present, to watch, to record, to witness. I screamed anyway. The ceiling pulsed in reply. Dust fell like rain, scratching my cheeks. And then the strangest thing, the voice mirrored me. I am not afraid, I shouted. I am not afraid, the murmur repeated, almost playfully, almost learning. It laughed softly, but the laughter was heavy, weighted with centuries of memory, malice, sorrow. And then came the first lesson of the reversal. Marin's story was no longer hers alone. It was mine, intertwined. And anyone who had caused pain here, any echoes of cruelty in the dorm would be accounted for. I ran to the window, trying to escape, but the door had locked itself. The closet door creaked open slowly. Inside, Marin's notebooks scattered across the floor, pages curling in the heatless air. They whispered to me words not written, letters moving like water, forming sentences I hadn't read before. Witness it, complete it. The balance cannot wait. I realized then that I was not just a bystander. I had become the instrument of the murmur's lesson. The first victim appeared 2 hours later, or maybe it was longer. Time had no meaning here. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Not slow, not casual, deliberate, as if measuring each moment. Then, a girl's voice. Hesitant. Eliza? Are you there? The voice belonged to a transfer student who had moved in recently. Someone I had seen in passing but never spoken to. I wanted to warn her. To tell her to run. But the murmur's presence was everywhere now. Even my own thoughts were mirrored in whispers above me. Do not interfere, it said. The girl opened the door, and I watched. The murmur circled her in shadows, unseen yet precise. Her legs trembled. She gasped, clutching her backpack. The murmur spoke in her ear. In a voice only she could hear. Balance must be restored. Then, as if pulled by unseen cords, she was lifted. Not violently, but deliberately, until her feet left the floor. I could only record. The hours that followed were a blur. I could hear the voice of Marin, overlapping mine in the recordings. It chooses its witnesses. It chooses its teachers. It does not forget. Every night, new sounds emerge. Scratching, creaking, murmured voices in my own inflection. The ceiling is no longer the ceiling. It is a space alive, moving, watching. The murmur had learned, and now it was teaching through me. I've tried to leave. I've tried to call for help. The phone dies mid-dial. The computer shuts off when I open a text. The murmur has learned to interfere, but subtly. It wants me to be present, recording, teaching. The notebooks are scattered around the room, each page curling, each word shifting slightly when I read. Eliza, it is not cruel. It is justice. Witness it. Complete it. Learn it. And I do. Every day, I watch, I listen, I record. I know now that Marin was only the beginning, and that the murmur will continue until every act of cruelty has been acknowledged, until the echoes have been balanced. I speak into the recorder, my voice trembling, yet steady. I understand. I will witness. I will record. I will teach. And the ceiling whispers back. Good. You are learning. The reversal is complete. I am no longer merely afraid. I am the conduit. I am the witness. I am the teacher. And the murmur is patient. It always waits for the next voice. I have learned to measure time by sound now. The ceiling, the walls, even the floor beneath me, all are alive with rhythm. Tick, scratch, whisper. Tick, scratch, whisper. Sleep is a memory I no longer possess. My body moves, eats, drinks, but my mind belongs entirely to the murmur. Last night, I understood the full weight of it. The new transfer student, the one I had seen 2 nights ago, had been lifted, suspended, guided by the invisible cords of the murmur. I watched. I recorded. I whispered my own words into the recorder, hoping to teach the entity restraint. But the murmur does not need restraint. It needs completion. Completion. I realized that the whispers, the scratches, the voices layered beneath mine, they were all fragments. Fragments of cruelty, guilt, and neglect. Marin had carried some of them. Amelia had carried some. I carry some. And now the murmur would carry them all through me. I spoke aloud to the empty room. I will finish it. I will see it through. I understand now. The ceiling responded. Good. The cycle demands a witness. A presence settled in the room, heavier than air. The murmur, no longer simply learning, had become alive. Its voice layered upon mine. Not repeating anymore, not practicing it, was teaching. Observe the balance. Witness the reckoning. I went to the closet. The red cords lay there, waiting. The hook above seemed to stretch toward the ceiling, long and patient, as though the building itself had grown it over decades. I hesitated, and then the whisper came, softer, almost coaxing. Do not resist. You are part of it now. You are the conduit. Hours passed, or maybe days. I cannot tell. The murmur orchestrates time differently. I watch figures pass students, shadows of cruelty move within the room, replaying memories I did not witness but knew intimately. I realize something terrifying. The dormitory itself is alive, stitched from memory and resentment. Every voice recorded, every whispered apology, every act of unkindness, It all becomes part of the murmur's mind, and I am part of it too. At some point, I understood my role fully. The murmur has no cruelty in its own nature. It merely demands balance. Every person who has caused suffering within these walls, whether through neglect, jealousy, or malice, must be acknowledged. Their echoes must be accounted for, and the witness the teacher has chosen. I am the chosen witness. You see now, the murmur whispered. Without you, the cycle cannot complete. Without you, Marin cannot rest. Without you, balance is impossible. I nodded, though no one saw. The cycle began to accelerate. Figures appeared in the room, ephemeral, shifting. Students I recognized, some alive. Some long gone replayed their small cruelties in careless words. The murmur amplified them, made them tangible. Record. Speak. Witness. I obeyed. My recorder caught everything. Whispers, laughter, cries, silent movements, confessions muttered to empty air. And the murmur learned more rapidly now. It absorbed each fragment, each recording, and mirrored it back to me in my own voice. Sometimes I could not distinguish who was speaking, me, Marin, or the murmur itself. Hours, maybe years, passed. Then the final moment came. The chords, the hook, the ceiling, they aligned. A perfect geometry of tension and expectation. The room itself breathed as one. I whispered the words I had learned to speak, over and over, narrating the cycle, the balance, the reckoning. They are all here. They are all accountable. I see them. I record them. I witness them. Balance is restored. The air pulsed. The walls vibrated. The murmur spoke in my voice, Marin's voice, the voices of the past. Cycle complete. I dropped to my knees. Relief, exhaustion, terror all intertwined. For a fleeting moment, silence. Then, a soft creak. A faint whisper in my ear. Another will come. Another will speak. Another will witness. I realize the cycle does not end. It cannot end. It is eternal. The dormitory waits for the next inhabitant. The murmur waits for the next witness. Marin waits, resting now, her voice finally still beneath layers of echoes. And I remain. The cycle completed through me, and yet I cannot leave. I record my voice now, not for me, not for anyone, but for the murmur. Each night I repeat the stories, narrate the whispers, recount the echoes, every act of cruelty, every neglected apology, every memory of fear captured, witnessed, balanced. And when the next student moves in, they will hear it. They will listen. And the cycle begins again. Room 2 Farads. 13 reoccupied. Recorder active. Whispers continue. The ceiling scratches faintly, as if approving. The murmur speaks, layered in voices, repeating mine. Welcome. You are chosen. I lie in my bed, recorder in hand, listening, and the building waits. The phantom hitchhiker. The highway stretched before me, endless black, under the pale smear of moonlight. I could feel the hum of the tires, the low vibration through the steering wheel, but it was hollow, empty, like the space inside me since that night. I tried not to think of her. Elena. Her laugh, the way she tilted her head when she didn't understand something, the way she trusted me. I shouldn't have killed her. I know that. But the thought of her leaving me, of losing control, of facing the consequences, it drove me to the edge. One argument, one mistake, one terrible, perfect mistake, and she was gone. I told myself I could drive through this desert, through the empty roads of West Texas, and it would all feel less. I would feel nothing. But the desert doesn't let you forget. Not really. My phone buzzed, cutting through the hum of the engine. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. Nothing. Just a hiss. A breath. Like air pressed through lips, cold and uneven. I hung up. Thought it was a wrong number. Thought it was nothing. But the sound stayed in my ears. I pressed the gas a little harder, and then I saw her, a woman standing on the side of the road, rain slicking her dark hair to her shoulders, clothes clinging. A thumb raised, hitchhiker, classic. But something about the way she didn't flinch in the rain, didn't even shift her weight. It stopped me in my tracks. I pulled over, rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" I asked, trying for casual. She didn't respond, just climbed in. The car smelled of wet hair and cold air. She didn't speak, just stared at me, eyes impossibly calm, fixed. I tried to focus on the road, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her gaze penetrated me. We drove in silence. At first, I thought she was just a hitchhiker, a lonely woman on a deserted road. But then she spoke, and I almost swerved. "Do you remember that night?" I froze. "What?" I muttered. "The night she disappeared. Do you remember?" My hands tightened on the wheel. I glanced at her. Her face was calm. Too calm. I don't know what you mean," I said, forcing a laugh. "Do you think you can hide it? That no one will know?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was precise, clinical, probing. I felt my stomach knot. The desert, the night, the rain. It all felt like a cage, like the world itself had constricted around me. She started asking questions. Questions only someone who had been there could know. The exact words, the way she screamed, the sound the car made as it slid off, the gravel details I hadn't shared with anyone. "Where did you put her?" I tried to laugh it off. "You've got the wrong person." "I don't. I've found you, and now you will come home." The words "come home" made my chest tighten. I thought about swerving, taking the next turn into the scrub, disappearing into the empty desert. But she didn't just sit there. Her hand moved, slow, deliberate, to the edge of the dash, then the gear shift, then the wheel. I said, "We're going home." Her face, it twisted, and my stomach dropped. Not human anymore. Features distorted, like the flesh itself had been erased and remade in some cruel pattern of memory. Yet I recognized her. "Elena." "No, you're not real," I whispered. "I am," she said, and the wheel moved beneath my hands, pulling, forcing, bending the car toward the cliff ahead. Panic surged. I fought the wheel, screamed. I thought about the cops, about running, about anything to stop her. But she was everywhere now. In the air, in the rain, in the pulsing thrum of the tires. Her voice, low and laughing, said, "Confess, Mark. Tell them." And I did. Words spilled out of me. The secret I had buried. The body I had hidden. The crime I had thought was mine alone. All of it poured into the night, into the desert wind. I was crying, shaking, barely aware of the road ahead. The car skidded over gravel, tires screaming, and then headlights. Police, a patrol car, their beams cutting through the rain. She smiled. Just for a moment. And then she was gone. I'm here now, in this cell, writing, confessing, reliving it. They think I'm alone. They think I'm safe. But I know she's out there, Elena. The road, the rain, the whispers behind the walls of my cell. Every time I close my eyes, I see her silhouette on the edge of the highway, wet hair plastered, thumb raised, always watching, always smiling. And I know, no matter how many walls, how many locks, how many bars, she will never leave. She waits, and I will never be free. The rain kept falling, relentless, hammering the roof of my car like tiny nails. My hands were slick on the wheel. Every turn of the tires felt like I was driving through molasses, though the asphalt beneath was smooth. And all the while, she sat there, Elena, silent, cold, her eyes unblinking, fixed on me. I thought, maybe, just maybe, if I ignored her, she'd go away. I was wrong. She spoke then. Not a question, not a greeting, a statement. "Do you remember the argument?" I swallowed, throat tight. Don't. You do. You replay it every night, don't you? The words you said, the way you said them, the way she looked at you before Before it ended, her voice was calm, steady, but the words were arrows, precise and cruel. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. I tried to focus on the road. The rain blurred the horizon. Lights from distant trucks reflected like knives across the wet asphalt. "I found you," she continued. "You thought you could hide. You thought you could escape." I laughed. A brittle, empty sound. This isn't real. You're not real. I am, and tonight, we're going home." Her hand moved toward the wheel, almost impossibly fast. The temperature inside the car dropped. My breath came in shallow gasps. I tried to steer away, to brake, but the wheel resisted, as if the tires were glued to the asphalt. "Mark," she said softly, a mockery of intimacy. "Tell me again. Where did you leave her?" I froze. My mind scrambled for a lie, for a joke, for anything to break her hold. I don't know what you're talking about." "Do you think I'm stupid?" And then she smiled. Just a smile. But it wasn't Elena's smile, it was the absence of warmth. A twisting, impossible geometry of flesh. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides. No lights, no other cars. Only rain, wind, and the pulse of the tires. "You don't understand," I said. My voice shook. "If you're whatever you are, if you're a ghost, then leave me alone." "I cannot leave," she said. "You brought me here. You invited me with your choices, your lies, your fear, and now you must go home." Her hands gripped the wheel. My own hands fought against hers. The car swerved. Gravel spattered. I could feel the edge of the drop ahead, cliffs jagged and black. "No, no," I shouted. "I won't." "You will," she said, soft and deliberate, as if reading from a script written long before I was born. Memories I had tried to bury rose like smoke. Her voice, Elena's, laughing at something I had done. The night she trusted me. The way I had silenced her, hidden her, buried her where no one would find. And now, she was here, not waiting to forgive, waiting to punish, waiting to teach me. "Do you feel it, Mark?" she asked. "The weight of what you've done? The way the night presses in? The way the road narrows? The way the world is closing in?" I wanted to close my eyes, to pretend, to disappear. But the world had narrowed to this car, this road, this moment. "I found you," she repeated, "and now you will go home." She told me to turn, to take the next exit. The sign flickered in the rain. County Road 27. I shook my head, gasping. "No, I'm not going there. I'm not doing this." Her hand moved faster. The wheel turned under my fingers, almost independently. The tires screamed against the wet asphalt. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the rain, drowning out my own thoughts. I realized then that she wasn't just a passenger. She was the driver now. Not physically, but spiritually, metaphysically. Every ounce of fear, guilt, and regret I had carried for months, she wielded it like a weapon. "Mark," she whispered, leaning closer. "Do you know why I am here? Because you thought you could escape me. Because you thought the desert would swallow your sins. But sins do not disappear. They wait. They breathe. They watch." I screamed. I twisted the wheel, tried to brake, tried to push her back, but the car obeyed her more than me. Gravel sprayed. The edge of the cliff loomed. I felt the wind, the drop, the inevitability of it. "Confess," she hissed. "Confess. Tell the world what you did." And I did. Words spilled from my lips. The truth. Every lie, every cover-up, every moment of cowardice. The secrets I had buried beneath asphalt and earth, I poured into the night, into the desert, into the cold, driving rain. She listened, and as I spoke, I felt the weight in the car lift slightly. The steering lightened. The tires gripped the road instead of tilting toward the abyss. "Good," she said. almost softly. You are learning. You are paying. But the lesson is not yet finished. Hours, maybe minutes. Later, I can't tell, I saw flashing lights behind me. Blue and red, reflected on the wet asphalt. Police. Real, tangible, human. Relief surged. I slowed. Heart hammering. And then, in my rear view, she was gone. The seat was empty. The air warm again. Almost ordinary. Yet I knew she hadn't left. She would never leave. The road waits, I whispered to myself. The desert waits. And she waits. I pulled over. Hands still shaking, breathing ragged. I dialed 911, told them the truth. Everything. The whole story. Confession, tears, panic. They said help was on the way. And yet, I feel her still. Watching, smiling, patient. Waiting for the next road, the next rain, the next sinner to drive into her path. I know now. Elena is never far. She is the highway itself, the desert itself. She is the silence behind the radio static, the whisper in the phone, the hitchhiker at the edge of the rain. And one day, she will come again. Home, she whispered. You cannot run from me. You never could. The rain had stopped. Not the drizzle, not the wet haze clinging to the asphalt, just the relentless pounding had quieted. But inside my car, inside my skull, the storm had only begun. Elena was no longer simply a figure beside me. She was inside. Every glance, every thought, every nerve in my body vibrated with her presence. I could feel her in the space between my ribs, in the tightening of my stomach, in the beat of my heart. I tried to tell myself it was fear, pure imagination, stress, delirium. But deep down I knew she had always been here. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to force control. The road stretched in front of me like a ribbon of black silk, winding through the desert. Nothing but night and memory surrounding it. You can't run, she said. Her voice came not from beside me now, but inside my own thoughts. A murmur, soft, intimate, teasing. You never could. And tonight, you will learn what it means to be driven. I jerked the wheel. Swerved slightly, heart hammering. What do you want from me? I whispered. Confession, she said. Acknowledgement. Admission. All of it. Every lie, every cruel word, every act you buried beneath asphalt, beneath earth, beneath fear. You cannot escape it. You invited me. I could feel her guiding me. Not physically, I could still move my hands, still press the pedals, but psychologically. Every thought I tried to cling to twisted slightly, replaced with her probing, subtle suggestions. Remember the night, she murmured, voice crawling along my spine. The look in her eyes. The betrayal. The panic. The silence afterward. Remember it. You owe her that. I tried to look away, to focus on the horizon, to recite phone numbers, song lyrics, anything. But the desert had vanished. The road had vanished. All I could see were flashes of her. The exact moment I killed her. The scream I had silenced. The horror I had buried. Hours, minutes, passed in this suspended, suffocating awareness. I found myself talking aloud, narrating the events, just as she instructed. I put her in the car. I drove. I didn't mean to. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Yes, she whispered. Say it. Say every detail. Confess. The cycle cannot continue unless the story is told. I realized then it wasn't enough for her to exist in the world. She needed me to experience her judgment. She was shaping me, guiding me, forcing me to relive every nuance of that night until the guilt was raw, exposed, undeniable. At one point, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes, wide and wild, stared back at me. But I also saw hers. Not in the reflection, not physically, but layered beneath my own. A spectral overlay. Her pale face twisted in silent accusation. Watching, guiding, controlling. The car hummed along the asphalt as if it were alive, moving with a purpose beyond my own. Every turn, every subtle shift was orchestrated, and I realized I was no longer the driver. I was a vessel, a passenger, my own will co-opted. "Feel it," she said. "Feel the weight of what you did. Let it press against you. Let it guide you. Let it teach you." And I did. We reached a stretch of road where the cliffs dropped sharply into the darkness below. My hand shook, my breath came ragged. But the wheel, oh, the wheel moved with her intent. "Look at it, Mark," she whispered, coaxing. "Feel the end, the edge, the inevitability. Accept it." I screamed, twisting, trying to wrest control back. Tires skidded on wet gravel. The headlights caught the jagged rocks below. My stomach lurched, but it was useless. "You're ready," she said. "Ready to confess. Ready to surrender. Ready to complete the circle." The desert around us had grown silent, oppressive. The only sound was the thrum of the engine and the pulse of my own fear. And then she spoke with clarity, slowly, syllable by syllable, as if teaching me how to speak aloud the truth. "Tell them. Tell the living. Tell yourself. Every secret. Every hidden deed. Every buried scream. Confess. Speak. Witness. Learn." I did. The words spilled out in a torrent of self-loathing and terror. Every lie, every detail, every act I had hidden from the world came alive in my own voice. The car hummed in response, vibrating with her satisfaction. I realized this was the reckoning. She had become not just the phantom hitchhiker, not just a ghost, she had become me, and I had become her vehicle. Hours, or maybe moments later, I saw lights behind me. The flashing red and blue of a patrol car, cutting through the darkness like divine punctuation. Relief surged, hot and bitter, but Elena didn't disappear. Not fully. Not yet. She withdrew. Yes, leaving only a faint pressure in my mind, a whisper behind my thoughts, a shadow in the corner of my vision. But I knew she would return. The lesson was not complete. The cycle demanded witnesses, and I was just the first. I pulled to the shoulder, hands trembling, voice raw. I dialed 911. I confessed. Everything, every detail, every step, every secret. The dispatcher promised help. The officers would arrive. They would find me. And yet, I could feel her lingering, watching, smiling, waiting, patient. "This is only the beginning," she murmured inside me. "You will see. You will learn. And the road never ends." I understood then. She was not bound by life or death. She was bound by memory, by guilt, by the acts of violence and betrayal that humanity buries beneath asphalt, beneath earth, beneath fear. She would always ride with the guilty. She would always wait, and she would always drive. The desert stretched endless and dark. I drove, surrendered, and listened. Every mile, every shadow, every whisper pulled me deeper into her control. And I knew I will never be free. Not while the road exists. Not while the night exists. Not while Elena exists. She is the passenger within, and I am the driver. Only in name. The headlights of my own car reflected in the wet asphalt like twin eyes staring back at me. I could feel her presence pressing from beside me, behind me, inside me. Elena. Always Elena. I had driven for hours. No, I had existed in a distorted time where hours and minutes were meaningless, but now the road narrowed, cliffs jagged, the desert swallowing everything else. And she whispered, "We are here now." I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, lungs burning. The air in the car had grown thick, almost tangible, heavy with inevitability. "No," I croaked. "I won't do this, I won't." Her hand moved. Not physically, I could still feel the steering wheel under my fingers, but her presence twisted the wheel beneath my grasp. The tires screeched on wet asphalt. Gravel sprayed. The edge of the drop loomed ahead. "Mark," she said, You cannot refuse. You cannot escape. You chose this road when you chose her death. Now, you will go home. I fought. My fingers pressed against hers, against the wheel trying to wrest control back. My legs pumped the pedals frantically, but the car obeyed her will more than mine. Look at me, she whispered. Really look. Remember the face you destroyed. Remember the life you ended. Do you feel it? I could see her now, clearly, as if she had materialized in the seat next to me, her features, grotesque, familiar, twisted by death and memory. A face I could never unsee. Confess, she hissed. Tell it. Say the truth. And I did. Every word spilled like lava. The argument, the panic, the moment I silenced her, the drive, the burial. The desert around me became irrelevant. The world had narrowed to this car, this night, this judgment. My breaths came in ragged gasps. My vision blurred. I thought about swerving, about taking the cliff, ending it all, but she laughed softly, a sound that echoed inside my skull. There is no escape. Not from me, not from yourself, not from the truth. You are mine, Mark. You always were. The steering wheel jerked violently under my hands. Gravel sprayed from the edge. The cliff gaped below like a waiting mouth. Panic surged, hotter, faster. No, I won't. You will, she interrupted. Or you will die trying, and you deserve neither mercy nor mercy's end. Only the reckoning. I slammed the brakes. Tires screamed. The car slid on the wet asphalt, but she laughed, the sound vibrating through the seats, through my chest, through my bones. She leaned closer, not touching me, yet utterly present, and whispered, "The wheel obeys me. The road obeys me. Your fear is mine. Your guilt, your punishment, all mine." I screamed, twisted, fought, but the car inched dangerously close to the cliff edge. Every instinct in me, survival, self-preservation, screamed, but it was meaningless. The desert, the night, the asphalt, all were hers now. Confess. And I did. Every detail, every lie, every act, every thought I had buried, every scream I had silenced, every lie I had whispered to myself to make it bearable. The confession spilled into the rain-soaked night. The desert drank it all, and I felt lighter? No, not lighter, not yet. I felt seen. "Good," she said, voice soft, almost tender. "You are learning. The reckoning is almost complete." Then, lights appeared in the rearview mirror, red and blue. A patrol car, piercing the darkness. Relief hit me like ice water. I slowed, hands trembling, heart pounding. I glanced at her. She was still there, still smiling, not angry, patient, waiting. "This is part of it," she said. "The witness must be alive. The confession must be heard. And now, you will be found." The cop car pulled up behind me. I raised my hands, voice shaking. I told them everything. The dirt road, the desert, the car, the burial. Every detail. I expected her to vanish once the authorities arrived. But she didn't. I looked back. The seat was empty. The air normal. Yet I could feel her. Watching. Waiting. Smiling. I knew she was there. Somewhere. In the corners of my vision. In the shadows of my cell. In the whispers behind closed doors. "This is the lesson," she whispered. "You are not free. You are never free. You are mine. Until another road calls." I sank to my knees, trembling, exhausted, alive, confessed, captured, and yet terrified. She had completed her purpose tonight. My confession, my terror, my compliance, all had been orchestrated. And still, I knew she would return. Every road, every hitchhiker, every sinner who thought themselves beyond reckoning. "Remember," she murmured. "I wait. I watch. I drive. And you will never forget me." I was handcuffed, guided toward the patrol car. The desert night stretched endlessly, cold and dark, and somewhere in the wind I could hear her whisper, "Drive, Mark. Drive into the truth, and never stop." I climbed into the back seat, sobbing, shaking, knowing the full weight of my guilt. And I understood. She was not vengeance. She was inevitability, and I had become her lesson. The road behind me disappeared. The desert closed in. And I knew she was already planning the next ride, the next reckoning, the next soul foolish enough to try and escape. The cell is quiet. Too quiet. I am here. Alive. Confessed. Caught. Everything I thought would be the end. The confession, the patrol car, the legal papers, the officers, is merely the beginning of a new chapter. And she is still here. I try to sleep, but sleep does not come. The darkness presses in, thick and oppressive. The fluorescent lights buzz faintly, rhythmically, a cruel metronome echoing the pulse in my own chest. I lie on the cot, staring at the ceiling, willing my eyes to close, and then I hear it, a whisper, soft, almost imperceptible. "Mark?" I sit up. Nothing, just the cold concrete, the metal bars, the dim light. "Mark, remember me." My heart hammers against my ribs. I tell myself it's the wind, the acoustics, my imagination. But I know. I always know. Days pass, or maybe hours. Time is meaningless here. The guards move through their routines, the sounds of distant keys, locked doors, footsteps echoing down concrete corridors. She is in every shadow, every flicker of movement, every silence. I hear her in my own voice sometimes, as I recount the events to the prison psychologist. I see her in the reflections on the metal tray, in the corner of the mirror when I wash. "You cannot hide," she whispers. "You never could. I am here, watching, learning, waiting." I try to explain to myself, she is gone. A hallucination, a product of guilt, a phantom created by fear. But she knows things I never told anyone, details of my confession I only whispered to the desert wind. And now, she repeats them, corrects me, taunts me, reminds me. I begin to notice patterns. The whispering comes before the lights flicker, before the cold breeze seeps through the bars, before someone glances at me in passing, as if expecting something I cannot see. It is not random. She is present. I tell the guards I feel watched. I tell the psychologist I hear things. They nod politely, offer cliches, suggest medication, but they do not hear her. "They never will," she whispers. "That is the advantage. Only you can feel me. Only you can witness me." And witness me. I do. I try to speak, to write, to distract myself. But every word is shadowed by her voice, every thought invaded, every memory twisted. She makes me replay the drive endlessly. The rain, the steering wheel, the confession, the patrol car, the desert road stretching to infinity. "Remember," she hisses, "every detail, every face, every scream. You were chosen to witness, chosen to carry the story, and it never ends." I wake in cold sweat, trembling. My cellmates pretend not to notice. The guards pass by. The world outside remains ignorant. But I know she is here. Always. Watching from the corner of my mind. Smiling. Patient. Eternal. Sometimes I speak aloud. I whisper my fears, my guilt, my terror, into the darkness. And she answers. Not always directly. Sometimes through the shadows. Sometimes through the smallest, almost imperceptible movement. A reflection. A flicker of light. A sound in the pipes. "Do you see now?" she murmurs. "This is the eternity you earned. Not death. Not escape. Only witness. Always witness." I cannot eat. I cannot sleep. I cannot think without her presence twisting my mind. The desert road, The asphalt, the rain, the confession. It is all trapped inside me now, and she is the keeper of it. I try to imagine freedom, walking outside, feeling sunlight on my skin, air in my lungs. I cannot. The bars do not matter. The walls do not matter. She follows me, in every reflection, every whisper, every shadow. I write letters I cannot send. I speak aloud to no one. I replay the confession endlessly, and she is always there, correcting, reminding, laughing, not cruelly, not like before, but inevitably, timelessly, eternally. Mark, she whispers, remember, witness, never forget. And one day, another will drive these roads. Another will think they are free, and I will be there again, waiting, watching, teaching. I understand now. She is not just vengeance. She is memory itself, the eternal witness to human sin. I am not alone. I will never be alone. Even in light, even in stone, even in isolation, she exists. Waiting, patient, unyielding, and I am bound to her, always. See? This is your eternity, Mark, she whispers. The road never ends. The witness never sleeps. And you are mine. I lay down, exhausted, trembling, and close my eyes. And I know she is here, always, watching, smiling. The balanced altar. Dr. Arya had arrived at the ruins of St. Lucian Abbey just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the broken walls in muted shades of amber and ash. She had traveled across Europe to reach this secluded site, driven by a mixture of scholarly curiosity and the whispered legends that clung to the abbey like ivy. The abbey had been closed for centuries, officially for reasons of decay and neglect, though rumors persisted of darker motives. Accusations of heresy, secret rites, and disappearances that had never been explained. Scholars spoke cautiously. Historians mentioned the archives, but Arya knew that the true story was buried, hidden beneath the stones and dust of the cloistered halls. She set her equipment carefully on the ancient flagstones, high-sensitivity audio recorders, cameras with infrared capability, and a notebook in which she intended to catalog every discovery. The wind gusted through the broken arches, carrying a hollow murmur that might have been nothing more than the whispering of dead leaves. She paused at the threshold, taking in the chapel, where sunlight barely penetrated the collapsed roof. The altar, once opulent, was stripped of its gold leaf. Statues that had once glimmered with gilded offerings now stared back, hollow-eyed, their hands chipped and faces erased by time, or perhaps by deliberate hands. Arya began her meticulous exploration, her steps echoing against the stone floors. She noted the scars along the walls, subtle scratches that seemed too precise to be accidental. At first, they appeared as though made by rats or weather, but the more she examined, the more deliberate they seemed, evidence of erasure, of something intentionally removed. In the sacristy, she found signs of the abbey's decay that went beyond neglect. Symbols, etched hastily into the walls in faded charcoal, suggested secretive rites, rituals designed to manipulate, to bend spiritual authority for purposes that went far beyond devotion. The air grew heavier here, charged with the weight of old transgressions. This is not merely abandonment, she murmured to herself. These marks, these symbols, they were left by hands that meant to deceive. Her recorders hummed softly as she moved deeper toward the cloister that had once been restricted to the inner circle of monks. Here, she began to detect subtle anomalies in her audio equipment: static, low murmurs, voices almost indistinguishable from the hum of the wind. She replayed a snippet of recording, a whisper, a single word in Latin, confiteor. She froze. Confess, the recorder seemed to say. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the microphone, but the sound persisted. Dr. Arya's pulse quickened, a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was the reason she had come, not merely to document, but to experience the history embedded in stone, to touch the echoes of the past that spoke through memory and guilt. Who would have said these words last? She wondered. A monk? A confessor? Or someone who died carrying too many secrets? She followed the audio anomalies to a narrow corridor where the walls had been blackened and the floor covered in dust thick enough to imprint each footstep. Every sound she made, her breath, her heartbeat, the shuffle of her boots seemed amplified, as if the abbey itself listened. At the corridor's end, she discovered a concealed doorway, partially hidden behind collapsed beams. Her hand hesitated on the latch. The wood was dry, splintered, and resistant. Beyond it, darkness stretched, like a mouth waiting to speak. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where the truth begins." She forced the door open, dust billowing like smoke. The room beyond was small, a private chamber perhaps meant for the abbey's most secret confessions. The walls were lined with niches, empty except for the faint outlines where statues or relics had once been. On the far side, a section of wall seemed oddly smooth, as though it had been sealed deliberately, concealing something beneath. Her recorder picked up a low hum, almost a vibration in the air. She pressed the playback, and a voice emerged hollow, echoing, impossibly old. "Who seeks the balance of truth?" Dr. Arya's breath caught in her throat. The voice was not a mere recording. It was alive, resonating with an authority that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. "I am Dr. Arya," she said aloud, feeling ridiculous speaking to an unseen presence. "I am a scholar. I seek knowledge. I seek the history of this abbey." The voice responded, patient and sorrowful. "Knowledge is heavy. History bleeds. And balance must be restored, lest the weight of lies crush the living." She shivered. The words were not threatening, yet they carried a gravity that pressed down on her chest. She moved closer to the sealed section of the wall. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every fiber of her scholarly curiosity compelled her forward. "What lies behind this wall?" she asked, voice trembling. The chamber was silent for a moment, and then the voice whispered, "They call me the confessor. I am the keeper of last words, of secrets too terrible to speak. And yet, I must tell. I must reveal what the greed and deceit of men tried to bury forever." Dr. Arya's hands shook as she adjusted the recorder. She was recording, documenting, witnessing. Her mind raced with the implications. A confessor's voice preserved after death, guiding her to a truth that centuries had tried to hide. The abbey did not fall to angels nor demons, the confessor said. It fell to the sins of those who swore to serve. Greed, deception, a desire to maintain power at the cost of the innocent. Arya felt a chill crawl up her spine. She imagined the monks, hooded figures moving silently through corridors, carrying out acts of corruption in the guise of piety. She envisioned the stolen gold, the erased symbols, the desecrated statues, and the people who had disappeared. "And what of them?" she asked softly. "The innocents?" The voice sighed, a sound like the scraping of centuries of dust. "Their bones remain hidden, buried within the walls of false sanctity. I alone bore witness. I alone confessed, until I, too, was silenced." A sudden sound echoed through the chamber, the scrape of stone on stone, distant, deliberate. Dr. Arya froze. Her heart pounded as the sense of being watched intensified. She realized then that the abbey was not empty. Not entirely. The presence of the confessor was not just in the recorder. It was in the air, the shadows, the unseen corners of the chamber. "Go carefully," the voice warned. "They always hear. They always watch. And those who see too much are often silenced." Arya's rational mind screamed to retreat, to leave, and call authorities, to survive. But curiosity, the same force that had carried her across continents, held her rooted in place. The voice had revealed too much, and yet hinted at more. "You will not flee," it said. "You will witness. You will record, and you will bear the weight of truth." She shivered, knowing that the discovery ahead would change everything, not just her research, not just her career, but her understanding of faith, morality, and human corruption. Somewhere behind the sealed wall lay the remnants of lives extinguished to protect lives. Dr. Arya pressed her palm to the cold surface. She felt the faint vibrations of hidden horrors. The past, heavy and suffocating, pressed against her, demanding acknowledgement. "I will bear witness," she whispered, more to herself than to the confessor. "I will record it all." And in that moment, the chamber seemed to exhale a low, mournful sound, almost a sigh of relief. The voice murmured once more, reverent and urgent. "Then go, see, know, and remember, balance is fragile, and those who upset it must always be accounted for." Arya stepped back, heart racing. The pilgrimage had only just begun. The Abbey's secrets were stirring, eager to reveal themselves to the one who dared listen, and she understood that she was no longer merely a scholar. She had become a witness, bound by the weight of confession and the darkness of human greed. The shadows deepened, the corridors whispered, and Dr. Arya knew she could not turn away. The morning light was weak and pale as Dr. Arya stepped further into the ruined abbey. The shadows from the collapsed roof stretched like skeletal fingers across the floor, elongating and twisting as the sun inched higher. Every step she took sent a whisper of dust into the air, a cloud that seemed to shimmer with secrets. The corridors were narrow, lined with flaking plaster and scorched wood, each corner concealing a history she could feel pressing against her. As she advanced, her recorder picked up subtle irregularities in the acoustics, murmurs that could not have come from the wind, patterns that suggested a presence both patient and deliberate. "They linger," the voice whispered softly through her headphones. "They linger because balance was broken here, and it must be remembered." Arya paused, heart pounding. The confessor's voice, disembodied yet intimate, seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Every syllable carried centuries of weight, guilt, and sorrow. "Balance," she muttered. What was disturbed? The reply was immediate, urgent. Greed, vanity, hypocrisy. The sins of those entrusted with sanctity cannot fade quietly. They demand witness. In the former cloister, she observed the first tangible signs of corruption. Statues of saints had been defaced. Gold leaf stripped from their surfaces revealed raw, splintered wood beneath. Faces had been scratched, expressions erased, hands broken from the wrists. Every detail suggested a careful, ritualistic desecration. Arya bent to examine the markings. "They did this intentionally," she whispered. "It was deliberate, ceremonial even." The confessor's voice guided her further into the labyrinth of corridors. "Follow the signs. Listen. The walls remember." A subtle draft carried the faint odor of incense, sweet and cloying, mixed with dust and decay. She realized that some of the rituals had been performed not merely for worship, but to manipulate. Symbols etched into walls and floors, geometric patterns, and Latin phrases indicated attempts to control, perhaps even to summon or suppress forces beyond understanding. "They sought power," the confessor murmured, "and in doing so, they shattered the order they vowed to protect." Arya's recorder picked up another whisper, this one layered and urgent, almost pleading. "You must see what remains hidden. The truth is not kind, and yet it demands acknowledgement." She pressed forward to a side chamber, smaller and darker than the rest. Candles long extinguished had left pools of wax hardened into grotesque shapes. Around the base of the room she noticed small indentations, marks that suggested repeated kneeling or the placement of offerings. The remnants of devotion had been corrupted, turned toward ends she could scarcely imagine. "These actions," she whispered, "they were not worship." "No," the voice confirmed, sorrowful. "They were preservation through violation, through concealment, through the sacrifice of innocence." Her pulse quickened. Every step deeper seemed to carry her further into a moral and spiritual abyss. She tried to rationalize it, a historian's mind seeking logical explanations, but the patterns she uncovered resisted reason. There was intent, there was malevolence, and there was secrecy. At the end of the chamber, A partially collapsed doorway revealed a hidden corridor, blocked by decades of rubble. Arya carefully moved stones aside, feeling as though she were disturbing the protective shell around a sacred yet terrible secret. The confessor's voice guided her, urging caution and attention to detail. The concealment is deliberate. What lies beyond cannot speak for itself. You must bear witness. You must understand the weight of what was done. The corridor opened into a narrow space, lined with carved niches in which small symbolic objects had once been placed. Many had been removed, but faint traces remained, scratches in the stone, subtle discolorations, the faintest impression of what had been. It became apparent that these spaces had been used to hide objects of significance, possibly sacrificial implements, perhaps even the bodies of those who had been silenced. Arya's voice trembled as she spoke into the recorder. "I'm beginning to understand. This was no mere heresy. This was organized concealment, rituals conducted to protect secrets, perhaps secrets too terrible to bear." The confessor answered, a resonance in her mind more than in her ears. "You see rightly. They took what they feared. They destroyed what they desired. And they silenced those who knew too much." As she moved, Arya came upon a wall that seemed different from the others, smoother, fresher in its masonry, yet subtly out of place. She ran her fingers over it, feeling the faint vibrations of something concealed behind. It was then that the air grew heavier, oppressive, as if the room itself exhaled a warning. "Behind this wall," the voice said softly, gravely, "lies the culmination of their sins, the truth they tried to bury beneath stone and silence. Few have dared to see, and fewer still survive the knowledge." Arya shivered but could not retreat. The historian in her demanded evidence, demanded proof, demanded the story that had been hidden for centuries. The confessor's voice grew insistent. "There is no balance while these secrets remain. You must see. You must bear witness. You must record. And remember, the weight of truth is heavier than any stone." She began to map the wall, noting its construction, its inconsistencies, the faint traces of what had been removed or obscured. Every detail whispered of ritualistic concealment, not random decay, but deliberate, methodical effort to hide the crimes of those in power. "I understand," she murmured. "This is what they did to protect themselves, to maintain the illusion of sanctity." "Exactly," the confessor said. "And now you too are part of the chain. Witnessing, recording, understanding. But do not mistake knowledge for safety. The Abbey still watches. The guardians of these secrets do not forgive easily." Arya's hand hovered over her recorder, pressing buttons to ensure that every whisper, every subtle echo of the confessor's voice was captured. The chamber seemed to pulse with expectation, as though the Abbey itself waited for her to act, to discover, to step into the role of witness to crimes centuries old. By the time she paused to rest, the sun had moved higher, casting narrow beams of light across the debris. Dust motes floated like tiny sentinels in the shafts of illumination. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every corner held a gaze, though no one was visible. The confessor's whispers persisted, guiding her attention, drawing her to areas she might have otherwise ignored. The relics, the markings, the erased faces, the voice murmured, all point to what was sacrificed for power. Innocents, women, children, hidden from sight to preserve lies. And I was forced to witness, forced to confess, forced to remain silent. Until now, Arya's stomach churned. She realized the extent of what she had uncovered and the danger implicit in it. Knowledge in this abbey carried weight. The act of seeing, of understanding, placed a mark upon the observer. "I must continue," she said aloud. "I must document everything. The world must know." The confessor was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice both grave and insistent, "Go further and see the heart of the Abbey. But beware, Arya. Those who seek balance are watched, and those who reveal the truth are never left unchallenged. Arya swallowed hard, the taste of dust and anticipation bitter on her tongue. She took a deep breath and stepped into the next corridor, ready to face the concealed horrors that awaited the altar of lies, the hidden remains, the weight of centuries pressing down upon her. The pilgrimage was only beginning. The hidden corridor seemed endless. Every step Dr. Arya took echoed with a hollow resonance, as if the stone itself were holding its breath. The faint whispers she had been following all morning grew louder, more insistent, weaving around her like a dense fog. She adjusted her recorder, feeling a chill run down her spine. The confessor's voice emerged again, more distinct than ever. "This is the moment," the voice said, somber and patient. "The moment when history demands a witness, when silence is no longer sufficient." Arya's heart quickened. She had expected revelations, but she had not anticipated the intensity of what lay ahead. The wall ahead was unmistakable, now smoother than the others, almost polished, as though it had been deliberately sealed to hide something. She knelt, brushing away centuries of dust, and traced her fingers along the surface. There was a vibration, subtle but unmistakable, as if something pressed urgently against the stone from the other side. "They hid the weight of their sins here," the confessor murmured. "Behind this veil lies the truth of their devotion and their corruption." Elaf, a part of her hesitated. Fear clawed at her rational mind. What could be so horrific, so unthinkable, that it required sealing behind stone for hundreds of years? But the historian in her, driven by curiosity and the imperative to witness, pushed her forward. "I need to see," she whispered. "I need to know." Carefully, she examined the edges of the wall. There were faint seams, nearly imperceptible lines, suggesting that it had been constructed to conceal a doorway or cavity. Her hands trembled as she pressed her shoulder against it, feeling the slight give of hollow space behind. Dust fell from the cracks, and she imagined what might be waiting on the other side. Relics, documents, or something far more dreadful. "Open it," the confessor said. "Do not falter. The truth demands acknowledgement." With a grunt, Arya levered a loose stone free, then another, until the wall gave way to a small, claustrophobic chamber. The smell hit her first, the coppery tang of iron, the faint, lingering decay of flesh long forgotten. She stepped inside, careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily. The flickering light from her portable lamp revealed what had been hidden for centuries. Bones. Hundreds of bones, arranged in a grotesque silence. The skeletal remains of women, of children, carefully placed, as though someone had tried to preserve them, even in death. The confessor's voice filled the room, reverent, almost sorrowful. "These were the innocents," he whispered. "Those who knew too much. Those who resisted, those who bore witness to the sins of the cloister, and so they were silenced, to protect the lie of sanctity." Arya's stomach churned. She knelt beside a small skeleton of a child, noting the deliberate positioning of the limbs, the subtle abrasions on the bones suggesting restraint. Her recorder captured every sound, every whisper, every exhalation, every creak of the chamber floor. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would they?" "Power," the confessor said. "Fear of exposure. Desire to maintain the illusion of righteousness. They worshipped not the divine but themselves, and sacrificed innocence to preserve their image." Arya's mind reeled. The Abbey's history, long shrouded in rumors of heresy and collapse, suddenly became horrifyingly clear. The destruction of gold leaf, the defacement of statues, the secret rituals, all were means to an end, a grotesque preservation of control. Every layer she had peeled back revealed deeper corruption. And now, here, in this chamber, the consequences were visible, undeniable. "And you," she said, turning her attention to the unseen presence, the confessor. "You survived." "Why?" The voice was quieter now, almost pained. "I was the last to bear witness. I confessed the sins of my brethren, and for this, I was bound to secrecy, threatened with death. I exist only as their record, their conscience made audible. I cannot leave. I cannot intervene beyond guiding you to the truth. And now you are showing me, she said. Why? Why reveal it now? Because the balance demands it, the confessor replied. Centuries of lies and concealment have tipped the scales. The truth must be known, must be seen, must be recorded. You are the witness chosen for this time. Arya felt the weight of the centuries pressing down. She realized that her role was not passive. She was part of the cycle now. Her recordings, her notes, her observations, they were threads in a chain stretching across generations, linking those who committed atrocities to those who would remember. I understand, she whispered almost to herself. I will bear witness. The confessor's voice grew urgent, insistent. Do not linger too long. Knowledge carries danger. Those who maintain these secrets still have guardians. You are not beyond their reach, even now. Arya swallowed hard, her fear coiling within her like a living thing. She had come seeking history, seeking understanding, and she had found horror in its most intimate form. The remains of the innocents stared back at her, hollow sockets demanding recognition, demanding justice. I must leave, she said aloud, shaking. I must bring this knowledge back. The world must know. And yet, the confessor murmured, even those who leave here carry the weight. You are bound, Arya, by the truth you have seen. Remember this, balance is fragile. Those who disrupt it suffer, those who reveal it are watched. A sudden metallic clang echoed from the corridor outside, startling her. The abbey seemed alive with warning, the very stones quivering, the shadows shifting, as if aware of her intentions. She moved quickly, retracing her steps toward the outer halls, her recorder clutched tightly to her chest. Do not falter, the confessor whispered. They watch even now. And those who see too much are often silenced, even in the daylight of centuries to come. The chamber faded behind her, but its weight did not. The bones, the stories, the confessions all pressed into her consciousness. Dr. Arya understood that the abbey's darkness was not contained in the past. It lingered, waiting, patient, eternal. She emerged into the dim corridor, heart pounding, the echo of the confessor's voice still clinging to the walls. Go, witness, record, but beware. The veil is thin, and those who guard the lies are never far. Arya knew that her journey was far from over. The abbey still held secrets, darker and more intricate than she had yet imagined. And she, unwillingly yet inexorably, was now part of its story. Dr. Arya's footsteps echoed in the labyrinthine corridors of St. Lucian Abbey, the sound swallowed quickly by shadows. The thrill of discovery that had propelled her forward now battled with a rising tide of fear. Each room she passed seemed to stretch endlessly, corridors folding into themselves, the air growing heavier, almost viscous, as if the abbey itself sought to hold her in place. You see too much, the confessor whispered, a voice both mournful and urgent. Those who guard these secrets do not forgive. They watch, even in the periphery of your vision. Do not linger. She clutched her recorder tightly, feeling the weight of centuries pressing on her shoulders. The hidden chamber she had discovered, with its silent witnesses of bones and eroded innocence, was a memory she could not unsee. The echoes of the confessor's words twisted into her thoughts. Witness, record, beware. As she moved toward the exit of the inner sanctum, a sudden shift in the air pricked the fine hairs along her arms. Something had changed. The silence, which had been almost reverential, now carried tension, a subtle presence, deliberate and aware. Arya paused, straining her eyes in the dim light, but saw nothing beyond the broken arches and strewn debris. They are here, the confessor warned. The guardians of the lies. You must not stumble, Arya. Keep moving, and do not turn back. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing, but the sensation of being observed intensified. The shadows seemed to thicken around her, bending the light, distorting the corridors she thought she knew. Every echo of her boots sounded amplified, every whisper of wind like a voice speaking her name. Then she saw a figure at the edge of her vision. Just a glimpse, cloaked, motionless. Her rational mind argued it was a trick of the light. Her imagination, yet instinct screamed that it was no mere shadow. She quickened her pace. "Do not flee," the confessor said, almost pleading. "Fleeing alerts them. Be deliberate. Be watchful." The figure appeared again, closer this time. She glimpsed the glint of a hood, the outline of a long cloak, the subtle reflection of light off a metallic object held loosely in the hand, perhaps a staff, a rod, or some ancient implement of authority. Dr. Aria's pulse raced. The Abbey was no longer a place of study. It had become a trap, and she was trespassing in a realm where centuries-old protectors still enforced their charge. "Who are you?" she whispered into the emptiness. "What do you want?" No answer came. The corridor stretched on, twisting, in ways that seemed unnatural. Aria's footsteps were hurried, but cautious. Every corner she turned seemed to reveal another shadow, another glimpse of the cloaked figure, always watching, never fully approaching yet never leaving. The confessor's voice cut through her fear like a tether. "They are not spectral, though the Abbey may lend them the guise of phantoms. They are the guardians, bound to the ruins by oath and fear. They ensure that the sins concealed here remain hidden, and they will not hesitate to punish those who pry too deeply." Aria's mind raced. She realized that her recorder, her notes, her very presence had marked her as an interloper. The Abbey's guardians were testing her, measuring her resolve, her courage, her right to witness. Yet, with each step, her resolve hardened. She could not turn back now. A metallic scrape echoed through the corridor, startling her. She froze, heart hammering, listening. The cloaked figure emerged fully into view this time, moving with deliberate, silent steps, a ghostly rhythm that seemed almost preternatural. Aria's instinct screamed at her to run, yet she knew flight might trigger confrontation. "Keep calm," the confessor whispered. "Do not draw attention to weakness. Strength lies in observation, in clarity, in the persistence to endure." She edged sideways, pressing against the wall, trying to remain unseen. The figure paused, tilting its head slightly, as if sensing her presence without turning. Aria's pulse felt deafening in her ears. She could feel centuries of vigilance concentrated in this solitary sentinel, a being born of duty, fear, and the necessity to guard sins long past. Her recorder captured every subtle creak of stone and whisper of air. She realized then that her task was no longer merely academic. She was an active participant in the Abbey's enduring drama, a historian ensnared in the present by the echoes of past crimes. Suddenly, the cloaked figure moved, fast, smoothly. It was not running, yet it covered distance, with terrifying efficiency. Aria's chest tightened, her breath shallow, every muscle coiled for flight. She darted forward, turning a corner into a narrow hall, where the sunlight filtering through the crumbling roof provided a false sense of safety. "Do not be hasty," the confessor warned. "Their patience is immense. They anticipate your fear but not your resolve." Aria's eyes scanned the hall. At its end, a staircase descended into the lower chambers, the shadows pooling thickly at the base. She moved toward it, driven by necessity, curiosity, and fear alike. The figure followed, silent but relentless, a shadow that merged with the darkness of the ruined abbey. "Every step counts," the confessor murmured. "Observe. Endure. The guardians test all who seek the balance." She descended into the bowels of the abbey, where the air was damp and stale, carrying a weight of age and secrecy. Here, the smell of iron and decay was stronger, more tangible. Each step on the stone stairs resonated like a drumbeat in the silent underworld. Aria pressed herself against the wall, hoping the figure above would not notice the faint sound of her boots. The lower chamber opened into a small cloister, the remnants of an altar, visible beneath a collapsed roof. The figure had not yet descended, but the sensation of being watched was nearly unbearable. Aria's recorder caught a whisper, soft, almost intimate. "Balance must be maintained." Those who transgress are always observed. Tread carefully. Witness, for the Abbey does not forgive easily. She exhaled slowly, the sound harsh in her own ears. The guardian's presence lingered above, a weight pressing down through the stones, guiding and threatening simultaneously. She pressed forward toward the altar, where remnants of ritual remained scorched marks, traces of sacrificial oil, subtle scratches suggesting offerings long since vanished. "This is their domain," the confessor murmured. "Do not touch, do not disturb. Record, observe, and endure. Only then will the truth remain intact." Arya realized the magnitude of what she faced. She was no longer a passive observer. Every action, every choice, was now entwined with the Abbey's ancient cycle of secrecy and enforcement. The Guardian, patient and persistent, would not abandon its post, and she could not abandon hers. A sudden clatter from above made her jump. The cloaked figure had descended, moving silently down the remaining steps. Its form was more imposing in the dim light, the metallic glint of an object in its hand catching the flicker of Arya's lamp. She froze, realizing that confrontation might be inevitable. "Do not panic," the confessor said, voice firm, guiding her focus. "Observe. Do not provoke. Your endurance is your shield." Arya pressed her back against the far wall, trying to remain unnoticed. The Guardian paused at the base of the staircase, head tilting as if sensing her proximity. She could feel the centuries of discipline, vigilance, and oath concentrated in the silent figure before her. And yet, she did not move. She breathed, steadying herself, capturing every detail, every subtle gesture, every shadow and whisper. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure retreated up the stairs, disappearing into the ruins above. The oppressive tension lingered, but a pathway had been left open. Arya allowed herself a moment of relief, though her heart still raced. "You have endured the first test," the confessor said softly. "The Guardians permit passage for now, but beware the Abbey does not forget, and those who see too much are never truly free of its gaze." She moved toward the remnants of the altar, documenting every detail, every scratch, every symbol. The weight of centuries pressed on her shoulders, but she pressed forward, knowing that the revelations ahead would demand courage, clarity, and unwavering resolve. The Abbey was alive with secrets, and Dr. Arya had stepped fully into its history. A witness, a recorder, and a participant in a story, centuries in the making. "Doctor." Arya's footsteps echoed in the shadowed nave of St. Lucian Abbey, her lamp casting long, trembling beams across the cracked stone floor. Every inch she traversed felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of centuries of guilt, deception, and unpunished sin pressed directly upon her. The confessor's whispers had guided her this far, but now, in the heart of the Abbey, she felt an oppressive gravity she could not evade. "The culmination awaits," the confessor murmured, soft yet insistent. "Here, you will see what was hidden and feel the full measure of the imbalance." The altar ahead was more intact than the rest of the ruined abbey, though its surface was blackened by age and ritual. Symbols etched deep into the stone pulsed faintly in the flickering light, the scars of devotion twisted into marks of secrecy. Arya's breath caught as she realized the deliberate cruelty, sacrilege woven into worship, corruption masquerading as sanctity. She stepped closer, the metallic tang of decay heavy in the air. Her lamp illuminated small alcoves around the altar. Tiny bones, worn and fragile, peeked from the dust, reminders of the innocents sacrificed to protect lies. "Doctor." Arya's hands trembled as she adjusted her recorder, capturing the subtle sounds of the abbey, the shifting of dust, the faint scrape of unseen feet, and beneath it all, the whisper of the confessor's voice. "The guardians of this place are patient," the voice said, reverent, yet warning. "They ensure that the sins concealed remain untouched. Yet you have come far, witness. Now you must understand." Arya's stomach churned as she absorbed the full scope of the abbey's horrors. Statues defaced, relics desecrated, bones hidden, ritual sacrifices all orchestrated to maintain the illusion of divine order. And in the center of it all, the altar itself seemed alive with memory, vibrating faintly with the anguish of centuries. "Why reveal this to me?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Why guide me into this horror?" "Because balance cannot endure in silence," the confessor replied. "Those who know must bear witness, and those who bear witness must carry the weight. You are the chosen observer, bound by duty, knowledge, and conscience." A sudden draft stirred the chamber, rustling the pages of Arya's notebook. Shadows deepened, stretching across the floor like reaching hands. She turned, feeling the presence of the Abbey's guardians more acutely than ever. Cloaked figures moved at the edges of her vision, guardians of stone and oath, incorporeal yet unyielding. "They do not forgive transgression," the confessor murmured, "and those who pry too deeply are marked. Watch, listen, endure." Arya forced herself to focus on the altar, documenting every detail. Symbols twisted into incomprehensible patterns, scratches and etchings denoting rituals of concealment and confession. Her hands shook, yet she persisted. Every note, every recording, every photograph was an act of defiance. A defiance sanctioned by the confessor, yet perilous in its assertion of truth. Then she noticed it. A hidden panel, subtly carved into the rear of the altar. Faint lines traced its edges, the work of someone meticulous, someone who understood that concealment was the ultimate form of devotion. She knelt, brushing centuries of dust aside, revealing a small cavity inside. Inside lay remnants of confession, parchment brittle with age, ink faded but legible, names, dates, accusations, the full scope of atrocities meticulously recorded by those who had committed them, by those coerced into silence, and by the confessor himself. Arya's pulse quickened. She had reached the heart of the Abbey's corruption, and the weight of it was suffocating. I can't believe this," she whispered. "All these lives, all these secrets, lost. Belief is not required," the confessor said gently. "Recognition is sufficient. Bearing witness is your duty." A sudden clatter startled her, metal striking stone. The Abbey's guardians had detected her presence. Figures emerged from the shadows, silent but formidable, moving with a grace that was almost spectral. Arya's mind raced. Flight seemed impossible, confrontation inevitable. "Do not panic," the confessor urged. "Observe, record, endure. Fear is a tool they respect. Your resolve is your shield." And the guardians advanced, shadows stretching unnaturally, shapes blending with the ruined architecture. Arya kept her recorder raised, documenting the approach of these spectral enforcers. The sound of her breathing was loud in her own ears, her pulse hammering. Then, just as she braced for confrontation, a voice echoed, far older, reverent, and filled with sorrow. "You see, and yet you are not yet harmed. The Abbey tolerates your witnessing, for now. But beware, knowledge binds. Knowledge is a chain." Arya realized the truth. She was not simply a historian. She was now an active participant in a centuries-long moral and spiritual cycle. The Abbey had allowed her access, because she was capable of understanding the balance of bearing witness without destruction, of recording without interference. Yet, she was marked. Her every action, every note, every recording tethered her to the Abbey's legacy of secrecy and sin. She rose, slowly, stepping back from the altar, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon her. The confessor's voice softened, yet carried an unmistakable gravity. "Take what you have learned. Carry it carefully. The Abbey's truths are not for the careless or the faint of heart, and remember, those who reveal the darkness must also endure its consequences." Arya clutched her recorder, her notebook pressed to her chest, and walked toward the exit. The light of the setting sun broke through collapsed windows, bathing the ruined Abbey in a fleeting, holy glow. She paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. "Will I survive this?" she whispered. Survival is not measured in flesh alone, the confessor said. It is measured in the courage to see, the fortitude to record, and the wisdom to respect the balance. Go now, and remember, the Abbey watches, always. As she stepped into the open air, the wind carried the faintest whispers, indistinguishable yet insistent. Shadows shifted in the ruins behind her, guardians returning to their silent vigil. Arya felt the centuries of guilt, sin, and confession settle into her bones, an indelible mark of the Abbey's history. She walked away slowly, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long, twisted shadows across the desert of stone and memory. The Abbey would remain a repository of concealed horrors, but she carried the truth, a burden, and a testament. I have seen, she whispered into the recorder. I have heard, I have borne witness, and I will remember. Even as she left the Abbey, she knew in the quiet corners of her mind, in the subtle pull of conscience, that the confessor was right. Knowledge binds, truth weighs, and those who see the darkness, even with courage, are never truly free. The ruins faded behind her, but the shadows remained. The Abbey's guardians, patient and eternal, waited for the next witness. And Dr. Arya, though alive, knew she would never truly leave the Oracle's debt. I was born into a house that smelled of cedar, old books, and something I could never name, something between brine and soil that seemed to linger in the corners, settling like dust. My father, the man they called the Oracle, made the air itself seem different. The first time I remember sensing it, I must have been no older than 8, standing by the doorway while he spoke to someone I could not see. Do not fear what is unseen, he said, voice low and commanding. We honor them, and they honor us in return. But there are rules that must not be broken. I would soon learn those rules, not by lessons or lectures, but through the quiet, dreadful way our lives unfolded. My father never called himself a seer. To the townspeople, he was a prophet, a man who glimpsed the thin line between life and death. To me, he was a man carrying a debt that stretched beyond the edge of human understanding. Every visitor to our house came first for a free reading, a single glimpse at what was yet to come. It was always brief, always measured, and always wrapped in a strange ritual. My father would arrange the table, place the candles, and then speak in that same solemn cadence that made the air tremble. You ask, but the world has answers only for those who are patient. The first answer is free. Beyond that, the weight of truth requires repayment. I watched him do it countless times, his hands steady, eyes fixed on some unseen horizon. The world seemed to bend for him. Shadows shifted, the wind outside the windows stilled, and the faces of his guests would pale as though touched by a cold light only they could see. My mother's arrival in this story was no accident, my father always insisted. She bore a birthmark, a swirling crescent upon her shoulder that he claimed was a sign, a symbol of fate that had bound them together. It was not love that drew him to her, at least not at first. It was duty, a debt owed long before either of them existed. He found her because he had to, because a promise to a spirit lingered, waiting to be fulfilled. It is not passion that guides us, he said once, as I pressed against his side while he spoke with the dead. It is the balance of obligation, of contracts unseen. We do not choose the spirits. They choose the moments, and we merely obey. I had always been a curious child, the kind who asked too many questions, who leaned too close to the edge of things unseen. My father's rules were not suggestions, they were warnings. He would leave mirrors angled carefully, salt sprinkled along thresholds, and, on certain nights, a bagua mirror hung on the door, reflecting not just light but intention. I remember the night my uncle, my father's brother-in-law, the guest, died. The shock of it rippled through our family like a stone thrown into still water. My father's eyes darkened in that peculiar way they did before a reading, before an encounter that none of the living should witness. Leave the house this Saturday night, he said quietly to my mother and me. No one is to remain. He will visit, and only those who are present in the spirit's final gaze may see. But do not stay. Curiosity will be your undoing." I nodded obediently, my chest tight with both fear and fascination. I understood, or thought I did, but that understanding was shallow, a child's comprehension of debts and rules far older than I could grasp. The night came, cold and restless. My mother and I left the house, the wind snaking through the trees like invisible fingers brushing the leaves into whispers. I glanced back once, catching a glimpse of the bagua mirror on the door, its surface dark and reflective, flickering with the candlelight my father had left burning. It should have ended there. It should have been enough to stay away, to respect the boundaries that marked life and death, but I did not. Curiosity, a foolish, reckless curiosity, drew me back. The house greeted me like a sigh, the doors cold under my fingertips as I eased them open. The familiar scent of cedar and old books was tainted now with salt, and something deeper, heavier, like the ocean floor after a storm. The shadows clung to corners, moving ever so slightly, as if aware of my presence. I found him in the parlor, seated across from a figure I could barely believe, the guest. My uncle, pale and impossibly still, yet moving with a ghostly grace that no living man could muster. His eyes, a hollow reflection of life, regarded my father as though no time had passed, as though death itself had been a temporary inconvenience. My father's voice held steady, low and reverent. "You have come. Sit and speak, but beware the hands of the living. They cannot touch you without consequence." The guest's voice was hoarse, distant, yet unmistakably his. "I wished only to see my grandson once more," he said, and I felt the weight of longing in the timbre of his words. "Now, my debt is paid. No further claim is needed." I tried to step closer, to reach out, but my father's hand shot up, firm and commanding, holding me back. His eyes, dark and wary, fixed mine. "Do not touch him. You are not permitted. You cannot interfere." The air was thick, saturated with the scent of brine and damp earth, carrying the unmistakable taste of mortality. The room seemed to pulse with it, each breath heavy and deliberate. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I was rooted, a witness to something I could not fully understand, a part of a ritual older than myself. After a long moment, my father leaned back, exhaustion etched across his face, the burden of centuries in his posture. He whispered, almost to himself, "I am not a prophet. I am a debtor, a servant to promises made and debts owed. I do not speak the future, I bargain for it. I fulfill obligations, and I guard secrets that should not be forgotten." I absorbed his words with a mix of awe and terror. The birthmark on my mother's shoulder, the bagua mirror, the solemn rituals, all of it was bound together by debts older than memory. My father's power was not a gift. It was a burden, one that demanded vigilance, sacrifice, and obedience. The guest's form shimmered faintly, a presence both comforting and chilling. Then, with a slow exhale, he faded, leaving the room heavy with silence and the scent of salt and soil, the weight of what I had witnessed pressed against my chest. I understood, finally, that my father's life was not one of fortune or blessing, but of obligation and the constant, unending negotiation with the dead. I stayed where I was, silent, absorbing the lesson that had cost my uncle his rest and my father his peace. The oracle's debt was not measured in coin or favor, but in vigilance, secrecy, and the willingness to bear the burden of promises that spanned generations. That night, I learned the first rule of our family. Power, when drawn from the thin veil between life and death, is never free, and the cost, once incurred, binds not only the debtor, but the descendants who witness it, carrying the echoes of obligation forward through time. I left the parlor quietly, my heart pounding, my recorder in hand, the shadows curling like fingers at the edges of my vision. Outside, the wind carried the sound of distant trees rustling, the night unbroken yet heavier somehow. I understood then that I had become a part of the story, a witness to debts I could never repay, a boy standing on the edge of knowledge older than his years. Remember this. The confessor's voice seemed to linger, though spoken by no one. To see is to know, and to know is to bear the burden. Your inheritance is the witness. Guard it well. And so I began my own account, my own testimony, knowing that what I wrote, what I recorded, would carry the weight of centuries, and that the oracle's debt, like the shadows, would never truly leave me. The night my curiosity betrayed me began with a wind that rattled the shutters like skeletal fingers drumming on the walls. My father had gone to the garden to light protective candles, and my mother had insisted I stay in my room. The warning was clear. No one was to be in the house this Saturday night. No exceptions. Yet something inside me could not rest. The stories I had heard all my life, the whispered tales of spirits visiting, of debts being paid in silence, tugged at me. I told myself I only wanted to see, to witness, to understand. Perhaps, I thought, if I stayed hidden, I could observe without interference. But the veil of the forbidden is never gentle. I crept from my room, the floorboards cold beneath my bare feet, the air thick with the scent of incense and old cedar. The bagua mirror hung above the front door, its octagonal edges glinting in the dim candlelight, reflecting my hesitant shadow back at me. I paused, a shiver running down my spine. My father had said its purpose was protection, to repel the spirits from wandering into the wrong hands, but the mirror seemed almost aware, a silent witness to my trespass. Curiosity, I whispered to myself, is a child's folly. I descended the stairs and into the parlor. The air grew heavier with each step, vibrating faintly with something I could not see. And then I heard it, a low, almost imperceptible rasp, like air escaping from a deep and hollow place. I froze. The sound was not outside the house, nor was it any animal I knew. It was human, but not alive. Finn, my father's voice called softly, though I could not see him. You must not be here. Leave. Now. I ignored him. I had to know. I stepped closer, and then stopped, my heart pounding as my eyes adjusted to the dim candlelight. Across the room, seated at the round table, was the guest. My uncle, pale, impossibly still, yet undeniably present. His eyes held a sadness that pressed against my chest like a physical weight, and the faintest hint of brine clung to him, mixed with the earthiness of the grave. I should have turned and fled. I should have obeyed my father. But fascination anchored me, and I crept closer. Grandfather. My voice was barely a whisper. The guest turned his gaze toward me, and I felt the world tilt slightly, as if the air itself recognized his presence. He did not smile, did not speak at first. He simply observed, and I realized with a jolt that this encounter was not a greeting, not a moment of warmth. It was a reckoning. You should not be here, my father's voice urged, but there was a note of helplessness beneath the warning. This is not for the living to witness. I stepped closer anyway, drawn by a force I could not name. My father's hand shot out, gripping my shoulder with a strength that made me stumble backward. Do not touch him, my father hissed. You do not understand. The debts, they are not yours to interfere with. The guest's eyes softened, though the sadness in them deepened. I wished only to see my grandson, he said, his voice low and gravelly, carrying the weight of both life and death. That was all I desired. The debt, it is no longer mine to claim. I wanted to ask him questions, to understand how he could speak, move, and exist in the space between worlds. But my father's hand stayed firm, pushing me gently but insistently backward. The air between us was thick, and I could taste it salty and earthy, like a storm-drenched shoreline. You cannot cross this line, my father warned. Curiosity in the presence of debt is a perilous thing. Watch, witness, record, but do not touch, do not interfere. The guest raised a hand, pale and trembling, yet firm. He gestured toward the table, toward the remnants of what had been a ritual I could barely comprehend. My father's voice continued, low and reverent. We are bound by promises, he said, by debts made long ago. Every favor, every promise, every oath. It must be honored, even if the cost is ours to bear. I realized then that my father was not a prophet. He was a mediator, a negotiator with powers I could barely imagine. He had bargained for this final visit, for my uncle to see me one last time, and the price had been steep, perhaps too steep for me to fully comprehend. I should not be here, I whispered. And yet you are, my father said, voice heavy with resignation. And now you know. Now you bear witness. That is your debt, Finn. It is heavy, and it will never leave you. The guest leaned forward slightly, and I saw the faintest glow along the edges of his form. His face, though spectral, carried the same features I remembered. His eyes held the echo of laughter and grief, joy and sorrow. I felt a pang of longing, a terrible ache to touch him, to speak, to do something. But I knew I could not. My father's hand was a tether, holding me in check. I wanted to say goodbye, I whispered. You have, the guest replied. But understand this. What you see tonight is not granted lightly. The living cannot trespass without consequence. You are the witness. That is your burden. Remember it, and bear it well. My father turned slightly, his eyes locking with mine. The gravity of his gaze silenced me. In that instant, I understood that the oracle's gift or curse was never about foresight or prediction. It was about responsibility, about being the custodian of debts that outlive the mortal realm. The guest began to fade, his form dissolving into a shimmer of cold air, carrying the scent of the grave and the ocean in equal measure. My father whispered under his breath, a prayer, or perhaps a warning. Every debt has its witness, every favor, its ledger, and every soul who crosses the veil must respect the rules, lest the balance be broken. I was left in the stillness of the parlor, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. The Bagua mirror reflected my pale face back at me, the shadows in its facets deeper than any I had seen before. I understood now that curiosity was not a sin. It was a temptation, a challenge to the natural order, and for the first time, I realized the full weight of the oracle's work. The night stretched long, and I sat by the window, listening to the wind thread through the trees. I could still feel the presence of the guest lingering, and I knew that some debts, though paid, leave a shadow that never fades. My father entered silently, extinguishing the candles, his eyes heavy with unspoken grief. You have seen what you should not, he said softly. But seeing does not make you cursed. It makes you responsible. Remember that, Finn, and remember, the dead are patient, always patient. I nodded, my notebook clutched in my hands, my recorder running, capturing the echoes of a night that would haunt me forever. I had broken the rule, crossed the veil of the forbidden, and now I carried the first true weight of the oracle's debt. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. That night, after the echoes of my uncle's visit had faded into silence, the house seemed to hold its breath. I stayed in the parlor, my notebook open, my hands trembling. I was convinced that what I had witnessed could not have been real yet. The scent of salt and damp earth clinging to the air, the faint shimmer in the corners of the room, and the weight of my father's presence told me otherwise. The oracle my father sat across the table, his eyes shadowed, dark with the exhaustion of unseen burdens. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he drew a small brass bell from the shelf, its surface etched with strange runes I could not identify. With a deliberate motion, he rang it. The sound was hollow, resonant, and it vibrated through the floor into my bones. Every debt has its cost, he said finally, voice low and measured. Every promise exacts a price. And some debts cannot be delayed. I dared to ask, though my voice shook. Father, the people the ones you bargain with, the dead? He raised a hand, gesturing for me to be still. It is not as simple as life and death, Finn. The dead, they carry their debts into the world of the living, and I am the intermediary. The broker, I speak for them, I bargain for them, and I protect the balance. I leaned closer, curiosity gnawing at my fear. And the rules. The Saturday night rule, the mirror. The rules are protection, he said. Protection for the living and for the dead. Break them, and the consequences are immediate. I warned you tonight, yet you came. That is your first lesson. Curiosity is a temptation, yes, but it is also a call to witness, and the witness bears responsibility. Before I could speak further, a sound like the dragging of chains reverberated through the room. A coldness moved across my skin, like a shadow brushing over my shoulder. I froze. From the corner of my eye, I saw a faint shimmer, the shape of a man, or perhaps what remained of a man. It was the guest again, though not as I had seen him before. He looked weary, burdened, yet insistent. You are the witness, my father said, voice grave. Tonight, you will see why the debts must be honored, why the living cannot interfere. The guest's form grew sharper, more defined. I could see the fine lines of age, the grief that had haunted him in life, and the inexplicable sorrow of death itself etched across his spectral face. Yet there was no malice, only a weight of expectation, of something unfinished. I am here to finish what was promised, he said, his voice hollow but firm. The debt owed must be acknowledged. My family, my grandson, must witness it, or it remains unresolved. I realized, with a chill that gripped my chest, that this was the true essence of my father's gift or curse. He did not merely foresee or predict. He negotiated. He fulfilled contracts made in life and in death. Every soul had a ledger, and every ledger required a witness. And that witness, tonight, was me. Why me? I whispered. Why must I witness? Because you are alive, my father replied, his eyes darkening. Because you are part of this line. Because every debt must pass through a living heart to maintain balance. You will learn, in time, what it truly means to bear a promise. The guest drifted closer, his gaze fixed upon me. I could feel the pull of him, a subtle gravity that pressed against my chest. His presence was overwhelming, the weight of mortality and eternity combined. Do you see now? My father asked softly. The power you imagine in a seer is nothing compared to the responsibility. Each soul that crosses into the other realm carries its unfinished business. I must honor it, or the balance fractures. I nodded, feeling the enormity of the truth settle in my stomach like lead. My father reached into a pouch at his side and drew forth a small, intricately carved wooden figure, a miniature representation of a person. He placed it on the table, and I could see the faint shimmer of life within it, a ghostly aura that pulsed and breathed as if it were animate. This, he said, is the ledger. Each figure, each form, represents a promise, a debt, a life not fully concluded. My task is to manage them, to witness their claims, and to ensure they are honored. The guest extended a hand toward the figure. My father's hands moved quickly, placing the spectral object between them, preventing contact. Do not touch, he warned. Even the smallest interference from the living can corrupt the balance. The dead have their rights, and the living have their limits. You will see, Finn, but you must not act. You must not interfere. The guest's eyes softened, and a whisper of a smile crossed his face. I only wish for understanding, he said. That is all I ever wished. To see my family comprehend the debts we carry. I sat, paralyzed, watching the silent negotiation unfold. It was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a scene of cosmic bureaucracy that carried with it the weight of eternity. My father's hands moved in subtle gestures, tracing sigils in the air, his voice murmuring incantations that seemed at once protective and binding. The debt is paid in acknowledgement, he said finally, and the acknowledgement is the witness. You, Finn, are now bound to remember, to record, and to carry the weight. Your curiosity has brought you here, but it also makes you part of the balance. The guest began to fade again, the glow around him dimming like the last light of dusk. My father breathed deeply, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. This is your inheritance, he said quietly. Not power, not foresight, not magic. It is responsibility. The weight of promises, the debts of the departed. Every action, every silence, every witness. These are the true currencies of our family. I felt a tremor of fear and understanding alike. I had glimpsed the mechanics of what my father did, the enormity of his burden. The Oracle's gift was not for profit or fame. It was a heavy, relentless obligation, one that required precision, discretion, and a lifetime of vigilance. Remember this. My father added, leaning closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Every debt must be observed, every promise witnessed, and every soul, whether living or departed, is patient. They will wait, they will watch, and when the moment comes, they will call upon us to act or to witness. Him. The night deepened around us, heavy with the scent of cedar, salt, and damp earth. My hand shook as I held my notebook and recorder, capturing the moments that would shape the rest of my life. I realized that this was only the beginning. I had crossed the veil of forbidden knowledge, and now, having seen the bargain, I was bound to its consequences. In the quiet aftermath, I understood that the Oracle's debt was not mine to pay, but it was mine to witness. And witnessing, I now knew, carried its own weight, a burden that would follow me forever, whispering in the shadows, pressing in the silence, reminding me always of the obligations that stretched beyond the veil of life and death. The house was quieter than I had ever known it to be. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, as if holding its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. I had spent the hours following my father's bargain in a haze of dread and wonder. The notebook lay open on the table, the recorder still humming softly, capturing a silence thick with anticipation. My father moved around the parlor with deliberate care, lighting new candles, arranging their wax pools with meticulous precision. Each flame flickered against the shadows, elongating them into grotesque shapes that crawled along the walls. I watched him, my chest tight with anxiety, knowing that whatever he was preparing, it was something I was not meant to fully comprehend. "Finn," he said, his voice low, urgent, yet calm. "Do you understand the consequences of what you've witnessed?" I swallowed hard. I think so. The debts, the obligations, the spirits, they need witnesses. "Witnesses, yes," he replied. "But it is more than that. Seeing is not passive. Observation carries weight. And now, having seen, you cannot turn away. The balance has noticed your presence, and it will test you." I shivered, feeling the gravity of his words settle over me. The air seemed thicker, charged with unseen pressure, like the stillness before a storm. And then I heard it, a faint whisper, almost imperceptible at first, threading through the silence. "Finn." I froze. The voice was raspy, old, and impossibly intimate. It was the guest. Somehow, though his form had faded earlier, he had returned, tethered not by flesh but by the weight of unfinished business. "You saw," he murmured. "You watched what should not have been seen." "Thanks for you." I stepped back instinctively, my father placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "Do not fear him," he said. "Fear comes from misunderstanding. He does not wish to harm you, but his presence will remind you. Debts are living things. They hunger for acknowledgement, for recognition." The guest's form became more distinct, like mist solidifying into flesh. His eyes, sorrowful and sorrowfully knowing, fixed upon mine. And then, in a voice that seemed to scrape against my very bones, he began to recount the sequence of promises, favors, and unspoken obligations that had bound him since life. Each word reverberated through the room, heavy, cold, and almost tangible. "I promised," he whispered, "to protect, to guide, to witness. And when I failed, the weight fell upon my family, upon those I loved, and now, you." I felt the impact of his words as though a physical hand had pressed against my chest. My stomach churned. The ledger, my father's wooden figurines, glowed faintly beside him, flickering with pulses of light that matched the cadence of the guest's voice. "You must understand," my father said, "that every act, every decision, every silence you hold, these are counted. Every time you step into the realm of the dead, even as a witness, you tip the scales. And once tipped, the world demands balance. Yeah, I swallowed hard, the gravity of the situation pressing down on me like a weight I could not lift. The air grew colder, and the candle flames danced violently, casting long, writhing shadows across the walls. I could see my own reflection in the bagua mirror, pale and wide-eyed, and I realized with a jolt, the mirror reflected not just my image, but my culpability. The dead are patient, my father continued, but they are not idle. They notice who enters, who observes, who dares to record, and when you have seen, when you have witnessed, you are bound. You cannot unsee, and you cannot walk away. I nodded, though my throat was tight, my limbs trembling. I could feel a presence in the room, unseen yet undeniable. Something beyond comprehension, beyond life was watching. The shadows stretched, grew heavier, almost alive. My recorder picked up a faint hum, like the echo of voices, just beyond hearing. They will test you, my father said. The living, the dead, both. For the debts must be acknowledged, and the ledger balanced. I wanted to flee. I wanted to scream. But my body was frozen, my mind tethered by awe and terror. The guest stepped closer, and I could feel his sorrow pressing against me, an invisible weight that made it almost impossible to breathe. You carry a debt now, he said. Not mine, but yours. The debt of knowing, of witnessing, of recording. The Oracle's gift is not mercy, it is responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. My father's hands moved over the table, tracing patterns in the candle wax, murmuring prayers that seemed older than time itself. The patterns glowed faintly, connecting the figures of the ledger to the spectral presence of the guest. I understood then. The ledger was not merely symbolic. It was real. The figurines pulsed with life, with memory, with obligation. Every debt, my father whispered, demands a witness, and every witness pays a price. The guest's form began to fade, but the pressure remained. I felt as if the room itself had contracted, the air thick with expectation, with unfinished business, with the weight of eternity pressing down. My father turned to me, eyes filled with quiet urgency. You have seen, he said. You have witnessed. And now, you understand. There is no turning back. Every act of curiosity, every glance into the unseen, it binds you. Do you understand, Finn? I nodded, my hands clutching the notebook so tightly that the paper crinkled beneath my fingers. The reality of my situation crashed over me. The Oracle's gift was a curse, and I had inherited its first layer. I was not just an observer. I was now part of the ledger, part of the balance, part of the ongoing negotiation between life and death. Remember this, my father said softly, extinguishing the last of the candles. You have seen the burden. You will carry it not as punishment, but as understanding. The dead are patient, and so must you be. The room returned to silence, save for the faint hum of the recorder, capturing the echoes of a night that would linger forever in my mind. I sat there, shivering, understanding for the first time the full measure of the Oracle's work. It was not prophecy. It was not fortune-telling. It was debt, responsibility, and an unending vigil that demanded witness after witness, soul after soul, forever intertwined. And in that silence, I realized the true horror of my inheritance. The dead are patient, yes, but the living, who bear witness, are never free. The house was silent now, but the silence was not empty. It throbbed with the weight of what had come before, the lingering presence of debts I had not yet understood, obligations my father had carried for decades, and the inevitable knowledge that now some of that weight had been transferred to me. I could feel it pressing down, a tangible burden that seemed to settle in my chest, in my shoulders, in the back of my skull. I had watched my father negotiate, witnessed the guest, and seen firsthand the ledger, the figures, alive with spectral light, each one vibrating with the echo of lives unfinished. That night had stripped away any naive notions I had about the supernatural. The oracle's work was not a gift to be admired. It was a responsibility to be endured. "Finn," my father said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder, "the time has come for you to understand the legacy fully." I swallowed, my throat dry, my fingers trembling as I clutched the notebook where I had recorded every word, every whisper, every flicker of light that had passed between the living and the dead. "Legacy?" I asked. "You mean this burden?" "Yes," he replied, "and more. You have witnessed what few living souls have ever seen. You have crossed the veil of the forbidden, and in doing so, you have inherited the first layer of responsibility." The room seemed to grow colder, the candlelight flickering violently as if in warning. My father gestured toward the Bagua mirror, and I felt my reflection pale, wide-eyed, and somehow hollowed by the weight I had glimpsed. "The mirror does more than reflect," he said. "It records. Every glance you take, every secret you witness, every act of curiosity leaves a mark. The ledger sees all, and so must you." I followed his gaze to the table where the wooden figures still shimmered faintly. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that they were no longer just objects. They were extensions of memory and obligation, alive in the sense that life had once been, yet tethered to the balance that my father had so carefully maintained. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "you learn to carry it. You learn to witness without interference, to observe without acting, to respect the boundaries that separate the living from the dead. That is the true cost of the oracle's legacy." And my mind raced, trying to grasp what he was telling me. This was no longer a story of spirits visiting or debts being honored. This was a life, our family's life, defined by responsibility to the unseen, bound by obligations that transcended death itself. "And if I fail?" I whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Then the balance falters," he said quietly, his eyes darkening. "And those debts, they find a way to be collected, regardless of your intentions." A sudden chill moved across the room, and I felt it not a wind, not a draft, but a presence. I knew immediately it was the guest again, drawn back, not by malice, but by the inevitable pull of unfinished business. His eyes, sorrowful yet steady, locked on mine. "Finn," he said softly, "you have seen what I could not finish. You have heard what I could not speak. You are now part of this chain, part of the ledger. Do not fail, and you will honor us all." I wanted to speak, to ask questions, to beg for understanding. But my voice failed me, leaving only a trembling whisper. The weight of witnessing, of understanding, of knowing the depth of what my father had carried, pressed on me so intensely that it left me almost breathless. "I know," I said finally. "I understand. I will bear it." The guest's form began to fade, but the sensation of his presence lingered, like a shadow pressed against my soul. My father exhaled, a sound of relief mingled with exhaustion. But I could see the weariness in his eyes, the kind of weariness that comes not from physical labor, but from decades of negotiating with forces beyond comprehension. "Remember this," he said, extinguishing the last candle. "The living who witness the debts of the dead are never free. You will carry their echoes, their demands, their unfinished business. And when the time comes, you will be called to act not for power, not for glory, but for balance." I sat in the darkened parlor, the faint glow of the recorder illuminating my pale face. The wind outside moaned softly through the cracks of the windows, and somewhere deep in the house, I thought I heard faint footsteps, deliberate, patient, and watching. The ledger glimmered faintly in the corner, reminding me of the chains I had now inherited. "Why me?" I whispered into the darkness, my voice almost swallowed by the house itself. "Because you are alive," my father's voice answered from across the room. "Because you can witness. because you can remember, and because you can maintain the balance that the dead require. You are now the Oracle's heir, not by power, but by responsibility. The weight of understanding settled in my chest like a stone. I had glimpsed the true nature of the Oracle's work. It was not foresight, not prophecy, not magic. It was debt, obligation, vigilance, and witness. The dead were patient. Yes, but so were the ledgers, the promises, the echoes of lives that had not concluded. And I, Finn, was now bound to honor them. I could feel the presence of the guest lingering, a cold, steady reminder that what I had seen tonight would follow me forever. The house, once familiar and comforting, had transformed into a sanctuary of obligations, a repository of debts that transcended life and death. Every shadow seemed alive, every whisper carried meaning, and every reflection in the Bagua mirror reminded me that I was now part of something far larger than myself. "This is the legacy," my father said quietly, "and it will define you. You are not cursed, but you are chosen. To witness, to record, to remember. The Oracle's debt is not mine alone. It is ours to bear, as a family, across generations." I understood, in that moment, that my life had irrevocably changed. I had crossed the threshold, glimpsed the machinery of debts and promises that linked the living to the dead, and emerged with knowledge that would haunt me forever. The presence of the dead would always be near, patient and silent, waiting for their debts to be acknowledged. And I, no longer just a boy, was now part of the ledger. The recorder on the table whirred softly, capturing every detail, every shadow, every whispered word. I knew that long after the night ended, long after the candles burned low, I would carry the echoes of what I had witnessed. And in the quiet moments, when the wind howled through the trees and the house held its breath, I would remember that the Oracle's debt is never truly paid. It is only passed along, from one witness to the next, an inheritance of silence, responsibility, and eternal vigilance. And somewhere, in the shadows, I felt the guest's eyes upon me, patient and unyielding, watching, waiting, and I knew with a shiver I could not shake that the legacy of the Oracle would follow me all my days. The night shift dispatch. I had been searching for work for weeks. Every rejection, every "we'll call you back" shoved me further into a pit of desperation I didn't know I could feel. My apartment smelled stale. The radiator rattled in the quiet night, and my phone, my constant companion of hope and disappointment, had begun to feel heavier with every unanswered call. Then the ad appeared. Simple, almost mundane, yet promising a salary I hadn't dared to expect. Night shift dispatcher. Immediate start. No frills, no flashy promises. Just a phone number and a location tucked into the industrial outskirts of town. I remember feeling the prickle of caution as I dialed. The line clicked, and a voice answered, deep, gravelly, deliberate. "Jay, is it? We've been expecting you. Can you start tonight?" Something in the tone made me tense, but the urgency in my own bank account overrode the instinct to hang up. "Yes," I said, almost too quickly. "I can start tonight." "Good," the voice rasped. "Arrive at 11 p.m., park at the rear, enter through the side door. Mr. Vance will meet you." And just like that, I was committed. The industrial park was deserted when I arrived. Shadows of warehouses stretched long under dim sodium lights. The wind carried the metallic tang of machinery, and something I couldn't place, something faintly sweet, almost organic. My heart raced as I walked toward the building, the faint scrape of my shoes against the concrete sounding unnervingly loud. The side door opened before I reached it. Inside, the air was warmer, tinged with the smell of old electronics and faint perfume. A man stepped forward. Mr. Vance, they called him. He was tall, gaunt, with a voice like gravel sliding over broken glass. "Jay," he said, "welcome. You're here for the night shift. I hope you're ready. Nights are enlightening, but they can be relentless." I nodded, trying not to let my unease show. There was an office off to the side, fluorescent lights flickering lazily above a desk where a woman sat, papers in disarray around her. She looked up, smiled, and my stomach sank in a way I couldn't name. Veronica. Her hair fell in a cascade of black, and her eyes, impossibly dark, seemed to weigh me down. There was something not quite human about her poise. "Jay," she said softly, her smile curling unnaturally, "you'll learn quickly. Nights are long and lonely." The tasks were straightforward at first. Tracking shipments, logging vehicle departures, ensuring the night drivers followed protocol. But there was an unease in everything I touched. Every paper I stamped, every radio check, felt heavier than it should. Addresses repeated. Old area, Lot 13. And every vehicle dispatched carried the same silent weight, the same unspoken tension. By the second hour, I started noticing things that didn't fit. The driver's logs had names that matched missing persons in the local papers. Boxes labeled with innocuous titles like supplies or equipment always listed the same destination, Lot 13. And when I asked questions, Veronica's smile didn't falter, but her eyes, they were almost amused. "Curiosity," she said, leaning closer, "can be dangerous here. We like to know who will follow instructions and who won't." I laughed nervously. "I just want to do my job right." "Oh, you will," Mr. Vance said, emerging from the shadows like he'd been there all along. "But doing your job, that's just the beginning." As the night wore on, a colleague, someone who had worked here before, called me. The voice on the other end was breathless, panicked. "Jay," he hissed, "you don't understand. They don't move cargo. It's the souls. They're not shipments. They're dead, or lost, or something worse. Get out. Get out before they notice you." The line went dead, leaving a ringing silence in my ears. I stared at the blinking light on my phone, at the shadows stretching across the warehouse floor. The faint hum of fluorescent lights seemed oppressive now, and even the air felt thick, like it carried the weight of something unseen. Then came Mr. Vance, his presence sudden, looming like a shadow had taken shape. "Tests," he said simply. "Everyone must pass them. Tonight, you will prove your courage. Step into the warehouse, retrieve the signal lamp. 20 minutes, no excuses." I tried to mask the tremor in my hands. The warehouse was pitch black, a cavernous maw that swallowed my small flashlight's beam. My steps echoed unnaturally, as if the walls themselves were listening. Somewhere in the darkness, a faint shuffling, almost imperceptible, moved with me. I could feel it before I saw it, a presence, patient, watching, evaluating. Then I saw her, Veronica. She was standing near the back, holding a broken walkie-talkie like a relic. Her smile stretched impossibly wide in the dark. "Ah," she said, voice soft but chilling. "You've come to retrieve the lamp. How brave of you." I froze. The air smelled metallic, tainted, almost iron-like, and the shadows around her seemed to pulse, thickening into shapes that writhed just at the corner of my vision. "You're supposed to be alone," I whispered, my throat dry. "Oh, you are never truly alone here," she replied. "Once you step through this door, you belong. The night shift. It takes more than courage. It takes surrender." I tried to back away, but the darkness seemed to push against me, weighty and suffocating. My flashlight flickered, and when it came back, she had moved closer, the walkie-talkie dangling like a pendulum in her hand. Her eyes gleamed with something inhuman, and I realized, in a frozen moment of horror, that I might never leave. Somehow I broke free from the immediate terror and sprinted out of the warehouse, my lungs burning, my heart hammering in my ears. I burst onto the deserted street, waving frantically at a passing vehicle. Relief surged until the door swung open. Mr. Vance sat behind the wheel, smiling that same wide, knowing smile. "Welcome to the team," he said, voice rasping through the night. "You'll learn, Jay. Soon, you'll understand. There's no turning back once you've answered the call." I stumbled back, my mind racing, and something deep in the pit of my stomach knew he was right. No matter where I ran, no matter how far, the night had already claimed me. The warehouse, the lamp, The shadows, they had marked me, and I understood, finally, what the colleague had meant. This place was not about deliveries. It was about collection. Collection of debts, of souls, of lives, interrupted. And I, desperate, alone, and foolishly brave, was now part of the ledger. I ran, but I didn't just flee from the building. I ran from the knowledge that I was forever tied to this night, this shift, this unseen empire where darkness had a will, and where Mr. Vance and Veronica were its custodians. The night swallowed me, and somewhere in the distance, the warehouse lights flickered once, twice, then went dark. I knew I would return, because the night had made its choice, and I had no choice at all. The warehouse door loomed before me, like a gaping mouth, dark and endless. My flashlight's beam barely pierced the thick blackness, and the metallic smell of the industrial complex had deepened into something sour, almost decayed. I gripped the strap of my messenger bag tighter, feeling the sweat slide down my neck, and wondered, for the first time since arriving, why I had said yes. 20 minutes, Mr. Vance had said. Retrieve the lamp. No excuses. Simple instructions, yet the weight of them pressed against my chest. Something about the warehouse made time feel slippery, stretching minutes into hours. The shadows seemed alive, clinging to the edges of my vision, writhing when I tried to focus. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a dull thud, the echo bouncing off the metal walls, swallowing the sound of the outside world. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it, willing it to stay alive, and shivered as the temperature dropped suddenly. Cold settled into my bones, deeper than the night air outside could account for. Somewhere in the darkness, there was a faint hum, rhythmic, almost like breathing, but too large, too deliberate. My heart skipped, and I whispered to myself, "It's just the building. It's just the warehouse." But the voice in my head was weak against the whispering that seemed to curl around the steel beams above me. "Jay," Veronica's voice called, soft and distant, almost teasing. I froze. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once. My flashlight's beam quivered across crates stacked impossibly high, revealing shadows that looked almost like bodies crouched and waiting. "You have to come closer," she said, "or you'll never get the lamp." Something instinctively told me to run, but curiosity and fear combined into a paralyzing weight. The thought of failure gnawed at me. What would Mr. Vance say? What if my one chance to prove myself ended before it began? I moved forward, each step tentative. My shoes squeaked against the concrete, the sound deafening in the oppressive silence. I passed rows of crates marked only with cryptic codes. Lot 13, Section C. Lot 13, Section D. My stomach churned. The name repeated, like a refrain, and I knew something was wrong with these shipments. The hum grew louder, vibrating against my ribcage. Then I saw her. Veronica stood at the far end of the warehouse, hands crossed over a walkie-talkie, her dark hair cascading like a shadow in the faint light of the emergency exit sign. She smiled, but it was not warm. It was predatory, sharp, and it made my stomach twist. "The lamp," she said softly. "It's right there. Can you reach it?" My gaze followed hers. A faint glow, greenish, emanated from a small lamp sitting on a crate beside her. It was ordinary enough, or so it seemed, but the way the shadows pooled around it made it seem like a prize at the center of some twisted game. I stepped forward, but the floor seemed uneven, almost breathing beneath me. My flashlight caught movement out of the corner of my eye, figures shifting between the crates. I blinked, and they were gone. My pulse pounded. "Closer," Veronica whispered. The words weren't spoken, they vibrated inside my skull, curling around my thoughts, insinuating themselves. My hand trembled as I reached toward the lamp. The instant my fingers brushed it, a cold rush of air whipped past me, and I was suddenly aware of every sound, the hum of the warehouse, the whispering shadows, the soft tap of my own heartbeat. Then someone grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, flashlight trembling. Nothing. Only the sense of weight, lingering, like someone had pressed themselves into the very space I occupied. My breath hitched. "You're doing well," Veronica's voice said behind me, calm, patient. "But courage isn't enough. You must face it. Face what's here." I realized I had no idea what she meant, yet I could feel it, a presence heavier than a person, colder than the night. Shapes moved in the dark, almost human, almost familiar. I remembered the colleague's warning. The cargo? It wasn't goods. It was something else. I took a deep breath and moved toward the lamp again, forcing my legs to ignore the pull of the shadows. Each step was a battle, each echo a reminder that I was utterly alone. Except I wasn't. Something watched. Something measured my fear. Something waited for me to fail. I reached the crate. The lamp glowed faintly in my palm, and relief rushed through me. But before I could turn, the warehouse seemed to exhale. Shadows stretched, condensed, and I felt pressure on my chest, like a hand pressing down with intent. I gasped, and the beam of my flashlight wavered. Veronica stepped forward, her smile wider, almost unreal. "Good," she said. "But there's one final test." "What?" I croaked. She raised the broken walkie-talkie. Its static hissed and squawked. I recognized the distorted voice that emerged, not a broadcast, not a recording, but something living in the crackling signal. Hundreds of whispers, overlapping, urgent, pleading, faces, or the sense of them, pressed against the darkness around me. "Listen," she said. "Do you hear them? They are waiting. They are calling. If you are to survive, you must answer not with words, but with understanding. Fear is natural, Jay. Panic is weakness." I swallowed, my throat tight. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until my own thoughts were drowned. Shadows twisted around me, and I felt them brushing against my skin, cold and clammy. I understood. Then, this was the test. Not the lamp, not the warehouse, not even Veronica. It was me. My own courage, my ability to endure, my willingness to confront the unknown. I held the lamp tighter and whispered into the darkness, even though no one could hear me. "I am here. I see you. I acknowledge you." The shadows stilled, the voices dulled, but the sense of observation never left me. Veronica's smile softened slightly, though it remained unnerving. "Very good," she said. "You passed the first part, but remember, passing does not mean freedom. You will be called again, and each call will demand more." I backed away, every muscle tense, feeling the weight of the unseen eyes tracking me as I made my way to the warehouse exit. The cold night air hit my face, and for the first time, I gasped freely. My legs shook, but the lamp remained clutched in my hand. Mr. Vance was waiting in the shadows outside, the same wide smile etched across his gaunt face. "Well done, Jay," he said, voice rough like gravel. "But remember, this is only the beginning. Courage is not absence of fear. It is action despite it." I nodded, unable to speak. I understood. I had glimpsed the scale of what I'd stepped into. The night shift was more than a job. It was a covenant, and I, naive, desperate Jay, had now pledged myself to it. The wind whispered through the empty industrial park, carrying the faint echoes of movement behind me, and I knew that when I returned to the warehouse, when I answered the next call, nothing would be the same. Not me. Not the building. Not the souls that awaited delivery. I had passed the test of courage, but I could already feel the toll it had taken, the mark it had left. And I understood, with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. Courage would not save me. It would only prepare me to see the darkness clearly. And the darkness was watching. The lamp in my hand pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat, as I stepped back into the warehouse. The night had deepened, pressing itself against the walls with an almost tangible weight. Even after surviving the first test, my pulse raced, and every instinct screamed at me that I had barely scratched the surface of what waited here. Veronica was already there. She didn't move from the shadows, but her presence was unmistakable, as though the darkness itself had adopted her shape. Her smile was wider than ever, stretching beyond what seemed human, and her eyes reflected a knowledge that no one alive could possess. "Back so soon?" she whispered, the words curling around me, coiling like a serpent. "Do you not understand? The shadows never sleep, and now they move." I froze, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Something shifted behind the stacked crates. My flashlight caught glimpses of movement shapes too indistinct to identify, yet unquestionably there. They shifted, flowing, merging, dissolving back into the darkness as soon as I tried to focus. My stomach churned. "They are waiting for you, Jay," Veronica continued, stepping closer. Her footsteps were silent, impossible, and they are hungry for acknowledgement. "You've seen the ledger, the shipments, haven't you?" I swallowed hard. My mind raced back to the paperwork, the labels, the destinations. Old area, Lot 13. I had glimpsed the names, traced them in the missing persons reports, and felt my stomach knot in a tight, cold coil. "This is no ordinary night shift," she said. "These are not packages. They are the remnants, the debts, the unfinished accounts of life, and you volunteered to tally them." The shadows began to shift again. Faster now, like a tide moving beneath invisible waves. I could feel them brushing against my skin, cold and wet, pressing against me without substance. They whispered, but not words I could understand, just fragments of memory, emotion, despair. I felt guilt, fear, and confusion pressing against my chest, as if the darkness could reach inside and weigh my soul. "Do you see now?" Veronica asked, holding the broken walkie, talkie like a conductor with a baton. She raised it, and the static erupted into a chorus of voices. Some whispered my name, some screamed in agony, some laughed, a hollow, broken sound that made my teeth ache. "You are not alone. You never were." "Him." I tried to step back, but the shadows seemed to tighten around me, bending the light of my flashlight into impossible angles. Shapes formed faces, hands, torsos, and then dissolved before my eyes. One shadow lingered longer, and I swore I saw my own reflection twisted in it, screaming silently, wide-eyed, mouth opening and closing, with no sound. "Mr. Vance says you must complete the task," Veronica said. "But he also says, knowing too much is dangerous." Lay. I remembered him outside, waiting. The wide smile that had made my skin crawl. The smile of someone who already understood the rules of the night, of someone who had walked this path countless times. My throat went dry. "What do you mean, knowing too much?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. "Some truths are not meant for the living," she replied. "And some mistakes are unforgivable." Suddenly, the lamp in my hand pulsed violently. I stumbled backward, and the shadows surged. They coalesced into forms unmistakably human, yet grotesque. Their features blurred, their movements jerky and unnatural. Some reached for me. Others seemed to hover just above the floor, waiting. Fear gripped me so fiercely I could barely breathe. "Retrieve the ledger," Veronica said calmly, almost mockingly. "Complete your shift, or join them." Ledger? I had not seen a ledger. My mind searched through the piles of papers on crates, the clipped manifests, the dispatch forms, but nothing was labeled as such. And then I saw it. A slim black book on a shelf high above the crates, just out of reach. The shadows moved faster now, shifting around me like liquid obsidian. They pressed, tugged, whispered, each movement a threat and a lure. I climbed onto a crate, balancing precariously, feeling the weight of my own fear pressing down. My fingers brushed the edge of the ledger. Cold, almost pulsing with life, I snatched it, and the warehouse seemed to inhale sharply. The shadows recoiled slightly, but their presence remained suffocating. The whispers grew louder, now distinct, insistent. "You cannot leave," 1,000 voices seemed to say at once. I turned, holding the ledger like a shield. Veronica had moved to stand directly in my path, but her expression had shifted. Now, it was expectant, almost reverent. Her smile no longer felt predatory. "Good," she said softly. "You understand now. This is not a job, it is a debt, and debts are never forgotten." I tried to speak, to ask what it all meant, but my throat was dry, and my mind swam. The shadows pressed closer, and I realized that the warehouse itself was alive with them, moving in patterns too vast and complex to comprehend. Each shadow was tethered to the ledger, each soul represented by a line, a mark, a tally. "Mr. Vance will guide you," Veronica said. "But remember, guidance does not mean protection. The night, it tests, it corrects, it punishes, and you are now accountable." Suddenly, the hum of the building shifted into a resonance, vibrating against my ribcage, synchronizing with the pulsing lamp in my hand. I felt an almost physical tug toward the back of the warehouse, where the largest shadows congregated. One figure emerged, taller than any human should be, its outline jagged, its presence oppressive. "Step forward," Veronica instructed. I did, though every instinct screamed against it. The figure loomed, and the air around it seemed solid, dense, with the weight of every missing person I had glimpsed in the manifests. I felt their eyes on me, accusing, pleading, despairing. The ledger throbbed in my grip, and I understood. This was the core of the night shift. This was the ledger of debts, the record of lives collected, of balances maintained. "The ledger is not yours," Veronica said. "It is for you to witness, to acknowledge, to survive. Only then can you perform the duty." I swallowed, trying to steady my shaking hands. The shadows recoiled slightly as I opened the book. The pages were filled with names, dates, annotations I could not comprehend fully, each one a life, each one a story paused in time. I felt guilt pressing into me, the weight of every soul, the responsibility of tallying the unfinished accounts. The tall figure bent slightly, and I sensed its awareness. It did not speak, but the pull of its attention pressed on me like gravity. I understood the truth with a chilling clarity. This was not work. It was penance. The night shift was a contract with the unseen, a collection of debts owed by the living and the dead alike. Veronica stepped closer, whispering softly, "You have courage, Jay, but courage alone will not keep you alive. You must understand the ledger. You must accept it, and you must serve." The lamp pulsed again, stronger this time, illuminating the shadows in horrifying clarity. They moved with purpose, circling me, examining me, testing me. My legs shook, but I stood firm. The ledger trembled in my hands, and I felt its cold weight, as though it were alive, as though it were judging me. "Good," Veronica said. "Now, return it, and remember, the night will call you again, and each time, the test grows. The shadows, they never rest, and neither will you." I placed the ledger back on the shelf, my hands trembling violently. The shadows receded slightly, though their presence lingered, like an afterimage burned into my vision. The warehouse seemed to breathe a sigh, a low resonance vibrating against the steel beams, as if acknowledging my temporary survival. I staggered back toward the exit, the lamp still in hand, every nerve taut. Mr. Vance waited outside, the same impossible smile, the same calm omniscience. He nodded once, sharply, approvingly. "Well done, Jay. You have seen them. You have touched the ledger, and you have survived. For now. But remember, the night never ends, and the shadows, they move." I left the warehouse trembling, the cold night air biting at my exposed skin. The industrial park was silent, deceptively calm. Yet I knew, deep in my bones, that I had entered a world from which there was no real escape. I had glimpsed the ledger, faced the shadows, and now bore the mark of understanding. And I understood, finally, that courage would not save me. Knowledge would not save me. Only obedience and acceptance of the debt could keep me breathing another night. The shadows were patient, and now So was I. I knew, the instant I stepped back into the warehouse, that nothing would be ordinary again. The air was thicker tonight, the darkness heavier, almost solid, pressing against my chest like a hand made of stone. My lamp flickered weakly, its feeble glow illuminating the outlines of crates stacked impossibly high, shadows writhing in their gaps as if alive. Veronica was waiting. She didn't move from the far corner, but her presence filled the room like the darkness itself had chosen her as its avatar. The way she watched me made my stomach twist. It wasn't just attention. It was calculation. I could feel her measuring my fear, testing my limits. "You've returned," she said softly, almost singing the words. "The shadows have whispered to me. They are pleased, but they demand more." I gritted my teeth, gripping the lamp until my knuckles ached. "I want out," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to sound steady. "I don't care about your tests, your shadows. I want out." End of. Veronica tilted her head, smiling wider, impossibly wide. "Out?" she repeated. "You misunderstand, Jay. There is no out. Not for you. Not for anyone who touches this ledger." I swallowed hard. The ledger. The record of debts. Of souls. Every name I had glimpsed burned into my memory. Every whisper of the shadows now seemed like chains binding me to this place. "Then, what am I supposed to do?" I demanded. My chest heaved. "Just keep working? Forever?" Her smile softened, mocking, almost sympathetic. "You will do as Mr. Vance instructs. You will tally the debts, deliver the records, guide the shadows. That is your task now. And soon, you will see the final test." At that moment, a tall, gaunt figure emerged from the deeper shadows. Mr. Vance. His broad smile stretched across his face, pale and unyielding. His eyes, those empty, calculating eyes, met mine, and I felt the weight of every soul, every ledger entry, pressing down. "Jay," he said, voice low and gravelly, "you've survived the initiation. You've seen the ledger. You've felt the shadows. But survival is meaningless if you do not understand the price." I stepped back, my lamp shaking. "Price? I don't understand. This isn't work. This is madness." "It is not madness," Vance said. "It is balance. Every life taken, every soul lost, every misstep of the living. It must be accounted for. And now, you have entered the cycle. You are accountable." The shadows shifted violently, moving closer, brushing my legs, circling, pressing into my vision. My stomach churned. The whispers rose, not just voices, but cries, lamentations, accusations. I realized with a cold certainty they were all watching me, judging me, testing me. Veronica stepped closer, her movements graceful, almost predatory. "Do you see now?" she asked. "The lamp, the ledger, they are not tools. They are reminders. Reminders that the dead are never silent, and those who failed to heed, well, they join the shadows." I backed against a stack of crates, heart pounding, mind racing. I don't know if I can do this. I'm not like you. I'm not. You are what you are." Veronica interrupted almost kindly. "And what you are is enough. For now." Then Mr. Vance moved, stepping into the dim light. He reached toward me, and the shadows recoiled, almost reverently. "Tonight," he said, "you will face the final confrontation. Not with me, not with Veronica, but with yourself." I felt the shadows tighten around me, constricting, pressing at my chest, my limbs. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I could feel them pulling, tugging at my memories, my fears, my guilt. And then I understood. The final confrontation wasn't external, it was internal. The warehouse seemed to dissolve around me. Crates melted into darkness. Shapes formed faces of the missing, the lost, the forgotten, all staring at me, accusing me silently. I felt every wrong I had ever done, every compromise, every selfish choice. Their eyes burned into me, demanding acknowledgement, demanding confession. Veronica's voice echoed through the darkness. "Speak. Acknowledge. Accept. I choked on words, shaking violently. I accept, I whispered. I see you. You understand. The shadows surged, pressing harder, almost painfully. The lamp pulsed violently, throwing eerie light across the swirling figures. My mind reeled, almost breaking under the weight of their gaze, but I forced myself to hold the lamp higher, to face them, to see them. Good, Vance said softly, almost approvingly. Now you understand why the ledger exists. You see the debts, you see the cost. And now, you must act. Act? My hands shook. The shadows shifted, separating slightly, creating a path toward a section of the warehouse I had never dared to approach. A crate marked only with Lot 13, the same designation I had glimpsed before. I understood, in a horrifying instant, that this was the focal point, the source of the debts. Veronica stepped aside. Retrieve it, she said. Complete the account. Or, she let the threat hang in the air, unspoken but palpable. I approached the crate with trembling legs, every nerve on fire. The shadows watched silently, coiling and uncoiling like living smoke. I lifted the lid. Inside, nothing. Or rather, everything. Names, objects, remnants of lives, clothes, trinkets, personal effects all tied together, cataloged meticulously. I could feel the weight of them pressing into me. The shadows flowed into the crate, merging with the objects, acknowledging my recognition. See? Vance's voice was close now. Balance is restored but never complete. Every act leaves a mark. Every debt persists. I dropped to my knees, gasping. My head spun. The ledger in my hands trembled, pulsing with a cold, unnatural life. I finally understood. This wasn't a job. It was penance, and the penance was unending. You've done well, Veronica whispered, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was icy, and I shivered. But the night, it does not forgive. You will return. You will deliver. And every time, the shadows will demand more. The shadows withdrew slightly, but I felt their gaze linger, burning into my mind. I staggered backward, lamp still clutched to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. Mr. Vance's smile never wavered. Remember, Jay, courage brought you here. Recognition kept you alive. Action will keep you whole until the next night. I stumbled out of the warehouse, gasping, as cold night air hit my face. The industrial park was silent, deceptively calm, but I knew better. I had seen the ledger. I had faced the shadows. I had confronted Veronica and Vance, and I had survived. But survival was not freedom. Survival was a debt, and I knew, with a clarity that made my blood run cold, that I would return, because the ledger waits, the shadows wait, and the night never ends. The warehouse loomed before me like a living thing. Its steel beams seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a rhythm that matched the rapid beating of my heart. The night had deepened, blacker than ever, pressing against me from all sides. I gripped the lamp, every muscle taut, knowing instinctively that this night would not be like the others. The ledger waited on the high shelf, as if it had always known I would return. My hand shook as I reached for it, the shadows shifting around me, dense and unyielding. They moved like currents in a dark ocean, brushing my arms, tangling with my legs, whispering in 1,000 voices. Each whisper clawed at my mind, reminding me of every detail, every soul, every debt I had encountered in the past nights. Jay, Veronica's voice slithered through the darkness, soft yet commanding. Do you understand now? This is not a choice. It is your fate. I swallowed hard. I had seen the ledger. I had faced the shadows. I had completed the tasks, survived the confrontations, endured the terror. And yet, the weight on my chest told me it was never enough. I can't, I stammered. I can't do this anymore. Please, I want out. Her laughter echoed through the warehouse, a sound like wind tearing through hollow metal pipes. "Out?" she repeated, each syllable curling around my spine like smoke. "There is no out. You've entered the cycle. You bear witness now. You maintain balance. And balance is eternal." I stumbled backward, the lamp tilting in my hands. Shadows surged, almost like a tidal wave, pressing against me with a cold, living weight. The forms I had glimpsed before the tall, gaunt figures, the faceless shapes of the lost, flowed around me, circling, testing, probing. Every name I had seen in the ledger, every parcel of forgotten life, existed now as a presence, judging me, demanding recognition. Mr. Vance stepped from the darkness. The same pale smile stretched across his face. He held out a hand, beckoning me forward. "The final step," he said, voice calm, gravelly, resolute. "The ledger is not complete until you touch it with understanding, until you accept the debt entirely." I approached the shelf, lamp quivering in my grip. The ledger pulsed softly, almost like it had a heartbeat, resonating with the rhythm of the warehouse, the shadows, the night itself. I reached for it, and the air around me thickened, solidifying into a pressure I could feel against my skin. "Do it, Jay," Veronica whispered, stepping closer, "or they will consume you." The shadows reacted instantly, rising like smoke to envelop me. I could feel their weight, their gaze, their collective insistence. It was not fear. It was accusation, judgment. I dropped to my knees, hands trembling as I lifted the ledger. Pages rustled like dry leaves in a violent wind. Names stared back at me, written in meticulous, cold detail. Every line a record of life, death, disappearance, and unfulfilled debts. "You see," Vance said softly, "the ledger is not yours to own. It is yours to witness. Every name, every soul. You maintain the balance. Without you, chaos." I shivered, understanding sinking in like ice through my veins. This was no job. This was penance. This was eternal accountability. Every night, every shift, every ledger, every shadow, they were bound to me now. I had become a keeper, a witness, a participant in a cycle with no beginning and no end. Veronica stepped closer, her smile gentle now, almost maternal in a way that made my stomach twist. "The endless shift, Jay. That is what you've joined. You cannot leave. You cannot escape. Every time you think it ends, it begins again. Every delivery, every tally, every acknowledgement. The night continues, and you continue with it." I looked at her, my chest heaving, mind reeling. "So, I'm trapped? Forever?" "Not trapped," she said. "Chosen, selected, accountable, and necessary." The shadows shifted again, revealing glimpses of others before me, faces twisted in fear, resignation, despair. I understood with sudden, horrifying clarity. I was to join them, not as a victim, but as a participant. Every night, I would walk among them, witness them, maintain the balance, and keep the ledger alive. I tried to run, to escape, but the warehouse seemed to stretch infinitely. Corridors lengthened, shadows thickened, walls moved subtly, guiding me back toward the ledger, toward the center of the darkness. Every step was resisted by the oppressive weight of the unseen. Every breath carried the whispers of those I had glimpsed, demanding acknowledgement, demanding that I bear witness. Vance's voice came again, steady, commanding. "Do not fight it, Jay. Embrace it. The shadows, the ledger, they are part of you now, and you are part of them. Resistance only prolongs suffering." Veronica moved to stand beside me, hand resting lightly on my shoulder. The touch was icy, unyielding. "Accept the debt," she whispered, "and you may survive the night." I fell to my knees, cradling the ledger. I could feel the energy of the warehouse, the weight of the shadows pressing into me from all sides. My body shook violently, mind screaming in protest, but I forced myself to read, to acknowledge, to witness. Every name etched into the pages burned into my memory. Every soul, every loss, every unfinished account. I accepted them, one by one, as though swallowing the weight of countless lifetimes. The shadows pulsed, receding slightly, but not leaving. They were patient, eternal, waiting, watching, judging, and I understood. This was the cycle, the endless shift. I would rise, I would tally, I would witness, and then the night would return, every time, until I was nothing more than a keeper of debts, a guardian of balance. I staggered backward, exhausted, lamp clutched to my chest. The warehouse seemed calmer now, almost dormant, but I knew better. The ledger had been acknowledged. Yes, but the cycle would continue, and so would I. You understand now, Veronica said softly, almost kindly. The night calls, the shadows wait, and you endure. And Vance's smile was the last thing I saw before stepping into the cold night air. Silent, empty, terrifyingly infinite. The shift never ends, Jay, he said, and neither do you. I fled into the darkness outside, lungs burning, mind spiraling. The industrial park lay still, deceptively quiet. I waved down a passing vehicle, praying for escape. But when the driver's door opened, the smile that greeted me chilled me to the bone. Mr. Vance, waiting, watching, always watching. And I knew with absolute certainty that there was no escape. The ledger, the shadows, the endless shift. They were mine now, and I would return, again and again. The night was eternal, and so was my duty. I was the night shift. You survived, for now. The dormitories, the highways, the altars, the oracles, and the night shifts have revealed their truths. But remember, these tales do not end with the turn of the page or the closing of your eyes. The whispers linger. The debts remain. The shadows wait, patiently, silently, for the next soul who dares to listen. Sleep, if you can. And when you do, beware what stirs in the corners, and who might be watching from the darkness. Until next time, dear listener, keep your ears open and your heart guarded. The night is never truly over.